Okay, we are ready to go.
All right. Thank you, Brendan. Welcome to the October 10th, 2023 Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee meeting of Manhattan Community Board 6. My name is Reshma Patel, and I'm chair of this committee. Tonight, we're joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Berth. This meeting is called to order at, let's see the time, it's 6:36 p.m. And as a reminder, New York state law now requires that all community board members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you have by raising your hand. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. Thank you, Steve, for taking the minutes tonight. Steve is a new member and he volunteered right away to take minutes. So we really appreciate it. And we do need people to take minutes for future meetings, and we'd love for people to volunteer. So please talk to Brendan. Now, Brendan, if you can take the roll call.
Okay. Committee members, you will unmute your committee members. When I call your name, please answer present. Jim Collins.
Here.
B. Desmond.
Present.
Ned Kalani. Present. Ava Marie Lassiter.
Present.
Steve O. I do not see Steve here. Reshma Patel.
Here.
David Lowenstein. I do not see.
He had said he couldn't make it. He's excused.
That's right. Stephen Perez.
Present.
And Roberto Ruiz Melendez. Present. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Brendan. So we want to adopt the agenda. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. I need to see the agenda. So there's one item on this agenda, point 2, which is a discussion of the transparency of state regulatory agencies. I've moved that to November's meeting because the budget requests and the district needs statement discussion is probably going to take considerable amount of time tonight. And it turns out that that issue was not something that was urgent, so we were able to move it. So does anyone have any objection to removing this and then adopting this agenda as presented?
No objection.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no objections, the agenda is adopted. The meetings from the last meeting we had, which was in June, were also distributed in advance. Does anyone have any objections to adopting the minutes from the June 12th, 2023?
Just a point of correction, Reshma. Those minutes are still being drafted, so there are no minutes.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't see it.
Okay.
Let them know, but when they are ready.
When they're ready, we will distribute them. Thank you for that correction. We will have to move that to the November meeting then. So some ground rules for today. No one can speak until granted the floor. Committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you to speak. Committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify you so you can speak. All committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. The chat function for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already shared aloud on the record during the meeting. So thank you all for coming tonight, especially members of the public. And I also want to welcome the new committee members, Robert and Steve, who have joined us tonight. And we are going to start this meeting off. The first part of this meeting is a public hearing on the budget request for Community Board 6. And so I open it up to anyone from the public who would like to speak, whether here in person or on Zoom. Okay. You can come up front so that everyone can see you and you can introduce yourself and then.
So what's this?
What's the question?
So this is the budget proposal. We had a question about something relating to pickleball courts.
Okay, so the question for those who are not here in person, there is a question about pickleball court. Are you, which organization are you with, or are you here as an individual?
We're here as individuals.
Okay.
Yes, but we also members of the St. Martin
Yeah.
pickleball community. Sorry.
Okay,
And so we do know that there is a plan put forward for the capital project in 2025. It is on the agenda tonight and just want to see where it's going and whether we'll make it there. Any information on that would be great.
okay, well, thank you for that. So the pickleball courts with St. Martin Park
Yeah.
is on the budget request already. And so it will be in our district needs statement that we submit to the Office of Management and Budget. And it was on, it's from last year, but we appreciate you coming and showing your support for it.
Yes,
Yeah.
because last year I was there in
Yeah.
in that presentation, and at that time we had about 500 members.
Yeah.
A year went by, and now we have about 2,500. So the community grew, and of course the presence here is just like a portion of what how large the community has grown. Just want to make sure that we are present, we are heard, we are seen, we exist, and we just want to have some view and attention to the project that we put forward.
Yes, and thank you. And there is another park, not that further south, from St. Martin's, Vincent Albina,
Yes.
Albina, which will be having, what was slated to be basketball courts in that renovation of that park, and now we're gonna be pickleball court. And I know that you guys have grown so much and you would like more courts, but I just want to let you know that there is some plan to add more pickleball courts in this district.
Yeah, perfect. And applause goes to that approval to have one pickleball court at Albano. Because
Yeah.
I know that initially there was none.
Yeah.
So maybe our two small suggestions would be that there would be one dedicated pickleball court there, and then we know that there would be one tennis wall. And if it's possible to just put the marking down at the tennis wall with the understanding that the priority goes to tennis players first if they ever show up. But we just see that the tension that if ever existed was because of the how to say, underutilizations of limited resources.
Yeah.
So we just want to turn whatever space that is existing into multi-purpose space, so that it doesn't have to be dedicated to only one thing. If it ever becomes vacant, we could use it for a different purpose. If ever people who have the dedicated space show up, we always would give them the priority.
Yeah.
Another one small suggestion to that space in Albano is also that there is large number of tree branches hanging over the space, and it makes it very difficult for pickleball players to use the space, because if the ball goes up too high, it hits the branches and the game stops. So if there is any possibility of trimming down some branches just to make sure that the space is clear for use, that would be great. But those are just the suggestions.
Okay, no, so we'll make a note of that in our minutes, but we will talk to the Parks Department. And Brendan, if you can make a note of it, to reach out to the Parks Department about that, because those haven't opened yet, and so even before we open, hopefully we can set it up so it is usable by the community.
Yes, wonderful as it is. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Any questions or comments from the public who might be on Zoom?
Well, first I see that CD6 member B Desmond has her hand raised, but I also see that a member of the public, Charlie Banks, has their hand raised.
Okay, so I will, I'm assuming, I'll let B speak because perhaps she has a comment on this and then we can go back to the public.
So thank you. I have a comment on the write-up. In the write-up, it says more than 500. Players. Are we hearing now that there's really more than 2,000? I think if it is that way, we should really be more current on our statistic.
Yes, and thank you, B, for catching that even before we pulled up the file, so that's great.
How many are active?
So we have a Slack group, and in that Slack group right now, there are,
2,500 something.
yeah, I can,
Wow.
there's a. I can check it out.
Active or just signed up? And
So, I mean, I would say, signed up, but a fraction of those would be consistent about the time that we've been talking about this.
Mhm.
So a regular percentage of those, whether it's 500 or 2,500, have been showing up, and it's been growing.
is there any money going towards this league or membership fee or anything of that nature?
No, so it's free to sign up, free to join. The Slack channel is simply a space for us to organize games, to coordinate games, because we need people to play with. Throughout the year, in the previous years, we would organize community tournaments for players to challenge themselves, to make connections with new players from other boroughs in New York. We do accept the donation, and whatever the money has been raised, we also make contributions to the park and service team.
Yes, no, and thank you. And I mean, I think I would just put 2,500 in that because the idea is if we had more court space, perhaps more people would participate and perhaps maybe all 2,500 would.
Okay.
So we will make that change. Thank you, B. And then going back to the question on Zoom from the public by Charlie Banks.
Okay, just give me a moment. Okay, Charlie Banks, you should now be able to speak.
Great. This is Charlie Banks. I am on the board of directors of the St. Barton Park Conservancy. As Wen and Sean, who are in the audience, as well as I, helped craft that capital expense budget request, which we submitted February of 2022. That number, as discussed, has grown fivefold. And also the plan suggesting 4 courts be resurface regulation pickleball. There's been a proposal to expand to possibly 7 courts or multi-purpose basketball courts and additional pickleball courts, given the huge demand and the fact that Carl Schurz Park, from what I've read most recently, may be going through renovations that might shut that down for a year's time. So should we submit a revised plan with the idea of possibly 7 courts, as well as obviously changing the number to 500 to well over 2,500 participants in the Slack channel?
So this request is on our budget request, and this is our last meeting on this topic because it has to be submitted in October to Office of Management Budget. So any further requests we have, say you want to have another plan, that will go into the budget cycle for FY 2026. Now you can always come and present to the Parks Committee, and we can discuss it, and the Parks Committee can discuss it, and there could be a resolution in support of a plan for 7 courts, and we can send it to not only the Parks Department, to our elected officials, et cetera, to get funding for that. So there are ways to still continue with this, but in terms of budget requests, what is being submitted today is what's going to be final because of the timeline. And I'm gonna just share, because I think that it would be helpful perhaps for people how this process all works. As you all know, the city's budget, we're on a fiscal year cycle that begins on July 1st and ends on June 30th. So right now we're discussing FY 2025, even though we are in calendar year 23, because we do it for the following fiscal year. And what happened, as mandated by the charter, is that each of the 52 community boards in the city will present their community needs to the Office of Management Budget with consultation with the agencies. So every year, OMB tells us it's usually some date in October by which we have to submit our request. And the budget committee spends much of the year talking to the different committees, as well as community groups such as St. Barton's Conservancy, community members who are playing pickleball, to find out what the community needs, and we put it into what is the district needs statement, and then we have an Airtable which lists all the budget requests. Once we submit this in October, we hear back at the end of January after the mayor, the budget is updated quarterly. The mid-year budget update happens in January, and once that happens, we will get a response within a few weeks from the Office of Management and Budget telling us which of our requests were funded. And so in the case of these pickleball courts, while you came to us in 2022, and we did submit this to Office of Management and Budget, it was not funded last year, so we are submitting it again this year. And we have some requests here that have been on this list for many years. We continue to ask for things, but there is a very oftentimes multi-year process in getting the money from the city and doing this. And what usually happens is when they respond to us, we respond back by April, and we tell them that, you know, things that weren't funded, why we need it. And then we begin the whole process again for the following fiscal year. And so we hope to get funding for additional pickleball courts, but I just want to let everybody know about how this process works.
Thank you for the guidance. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. All right, is there anyone else? Jim?
I just have a question. When did you approach Parks about your funding? Because it would have been nice to have those additional 7
I
courts.
think it was over a year ago.
Oh.
Probably, can you?
Yeah.
check? Because, it was in 2022.
No, so February 2022 is when they came to the Parks meeting, but the request for the 7 courts is happening just now.
Right,
now,
that's what
yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, so I'm saying that they should go to
If
back to
If
Parks.
they had gone back to
Yeah.
Park, if you had gone back to Parks earlier, we could have cleared it earlier. You know what I'm saying? And that's just unfortunate. It's one of my pet peeves is that we very rarely, when we do these budget requests, have the quantum of things that are required. We all very often will say more, but we won't say, you know, how many more or how much we need, et cetera. So if.
I mean,
So next Parks meeting.
I see, so, yeah, so at the next part, maybe we should raise the fact that there are 2,500 as opposed to 500, that's what you're saying?
Absolutely, and that you want 7 more pickleball courts.
Yeah.
You know?
yeah, and as I mentioned again, that there could be a separate resolution asking for this if
Yeah.
people on the Parks Committee agreed to that.
Right.
Any more questions? Seeing no more questions, I'm gonna close out the public session. Oh, we do, oh, sorry.
Sorry, I came late, but do
Okay.
you need to say anything about
Oh, so if you wanna just speak on Kip's Bay, just because, I mean, thank you for coming, and if you wanna stand up and you can be,
well, just that we did come to the Parks Department to ask for funding for repair of the pier or the underside of the park itself, which is deteriorating. There's sinkholes. It is apparently in design phase, but it's not fully funded. And so, as we spoke to Parks, they agreed to write a resolution in support of that. We also asked for water at the park. Right now, it's one of the budget requests to have the fountains repaired. And really what we need is water to irrigate much more than the fountains. So if we could make the fountains less of a priority and the irrigation our key priority. I guess it was last year, even the weeds died. It was so dry. So, and it's just, we have a fire hydrant that we can utilize, but it's just, it would be great to have a better source. And I believe Parks is writing a resolution in support of both of those, but we were hoping that they could be introduced.
yes, and so, thank you, Sandy, so just for those on Zoom, the Lines for Kip's Bay has requested improvements to the east side esplanade. You know, there's sinkholes, what was known as Glick Park. and it's in considerable disrepair and in need of renovations, but there's also no source of water aside from a fire hydrant. And that's not been there since Hurricane Sandy happened, and it is something that we really urgently need to provide for, because as Sandy said, even the weeds were dying. And and the Alliance for Kips Bay came and presented to the Manhattan Community Board 6 Environment and Parks Committee last week. And there was a resolution in support of this, but we have also, as a budget committee, have added this already to our budget request that we're submitting, and it will be in our district needs statement that we submit.
Thank you.
And it is two separate requests we're making, one for the irrigation and one for the improvement. Any other comments? Questions?
I see Cheryl Arluck has a raised hand.
Okay, Cheryl?
Just give me a moment. Cheryl, you are now allowed to speak.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to sort of reiterate what Zwin was talking about. I play at Albano every morning, and there are a lot of pickleball players and very, very few tennis players. However, we always defer to the tennis players when they come. And I understand that we're going to have one dedicated court, but not to have the markings on the area by the tennis wall seems like a waste, because most of the time the tennis players aren't there, and some of them, when they come, play pickleball with us. I've actually only seen 3 tennis players in all the time I've been there.
Okay, thank you. So putting the markings, I'm assuming it is really not that difficult. It's not going to be an item that even requires that much any funding to do.
No, it doesn't. Right.
Yeah.
It's just paint.
Yeah, and so we can request, again, this is the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee, but Brendan, if you can make a note that we bring this back to the Parks Committee and we speak to the Parks Department and ask if they can make these markings. I'm happy to do it. I happen to serve as a member of the Parks Committee, so I can do that. And hopefully we can get those markings, you know, at Albano, but also I guess you also wanted at St. Barton's too, the markings? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, seeing no other questions, the public portion of this meeting is closed at 6:58 p.m. And we will move on to the discussion of the fiscal year 2025 budget request and district needs statement for those members of this committee, and everyone else is still welcome to stay and ask questions after we have our committee discussion.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. So I will first start off with committee members. I know that we sent you updates along the way multiple times, and one very recently this afternoon. I'll start off by seeing if anyone actually had questions in advance before we start discussing each of these items.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Last year, the governor's budget, she put $25 billion towards housing, including 10,000 units of supportive housing. And I see that's our top priority for this coming fiscal year. Are we tracking any of that money out of our budget, either via the elected officials or here in the board office? It's supposed to be a 5-year plan, $5 billion a year, 10,000 units over 5 years. That's statewide. And then I believe the city added another 5 billion, which, you know, heaven knows where that is now, given the migrant thing. But I'm curious if are we we have any data on that? Do we have any numbers as to what is being of the should be 2,000 units this year? How many were, if any, were allocated to CB6?
Yeah, that's a good
Community
question.
B6,
That's a good question.
District 6.
We have not heard, any, at least as far as I know, we have not heard anything about any of those supportive housing units going to
Mhm.
our district specifically. But that's a good question. That's a very relevant question, certainly.
And so that's a question, I also, when looking through this, went and looked, I mean, the response we got from the Office of Management Budget was, this can be funded in part, but no further direction. And then when we
No
replied in April,
numbers.
we said we want more information on this, we get same response. And I asked the different committees to update, to give us information. I did not get anything back from the committee, but I did go look online to see if I could find where I looked
New
for our district,
supportive.
and I did not
housing
see any new supportive housing units in our district.
unit. Okay, that's what, that's why I always, and whenever we have these budget meetings, I always want to know, how much of whatever, whether it's 7 new pickleball courts or whatever, 100 units of supportive housing. And, I like to have a checklist, we've got this, but we're just asking for more, and it doesn't, you know what I mean?
No,
It
and
doesn't-
you're making a good point, and there's people who differ in this opinion about whether we want to get very specific, we want to make broad asks.
Mhm.
And I leave it to each of the committee chairs to present their requests the way they want to present them.
Mhm.
The one thing I will say is the women's shelter on 45th Street,
Mhm.
which was sold by the city to I'm blanking on the name, but it's in the request, that shelter is going to have, a portion of it is going to be supportive
Mhm.
housing as well.
The opening when? Now, this year, next fiscal year?
It should be opening relatively soon. There was an article that I found, I think
Okay.
it was just this August that was saying
How
that
many
it was
units,
gonna, it's, again, if we can pull up, Brendan, I think I put it in the write-up. And I even put the link to her.
Is that the?
Yeah, Kenmare Hall, and I thought I even put the link to the article with the update in that too.
Yeah.
I apologize, but I went through each of these and now,
Yeah, it says Kenmore Hall and the thing says 326 units.
okay, 326.
Kenmore Hall, that's 23rd Street, right?
No, that's the
45th?
45th Street. Shelter.
How many units?
It says 326.
Of supportive or just
I
housing?
need to read the article. I'm just seeing it. in the
Yeah,
notes.
it's not 326 of supportive
Yeah.
housing.
No, just,
Yeah,
just units.
it's gonna be a combination of a shelter, affordable housing, and supportive housing.
Alright.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see both B and Jesus have their hands raised.
Sure, so I will go to B and then Jesus.
Thank you. So I wanted to echo a little, I'm looking at the write-up for this one, and I want to echo a little bit of what Jim was saying. So can we be a little more specific when we say CB6 asks that additional supportive housing units be built in CD6? Could we make reference, just as a suggestion, to the state budget to do that and request that that's where the capital money can come from? Because otherwise, I'm afraid we're gonna get the same type of answer. It can be done in part, but it might be good to identify a funding source.
If someone wants to make a motion to add that, I have no objection to that. Yeah.
If B's making it, I'll second it.
Okay. Anyone have, if all in support?
Yes.
No.
Yeah. Anyone opposed? Any abstain? No. All right, we will add that. So we should just make that change right now, so Brendan knows what we want to put in there.
So just so I'm clear, the change is to include something about funding source?
Yeah, just say, can I see what you've got written there now?
Sure, just a moment.
Actually, can we see what Jesus has to say first?
Oh, yeah,
Actually, because
yeah.
Jesus may have a
Yeah,
comment on
yeah.
this. He may have additional information. Jesus?
So, hi, and Brendan, while I'm speaking, you can bring up, or if you want me to, I can bring up the editable version, because I see you only have the read-only version. If there are going to be live edits, we should have that. But to speak
Version
to,
on my laptop.
I didn't hear that, but to speak to Jim's point and B's point as well, yes, that's totally fair. Also, we didn't really get anything from the committee saying that they wanted us to track this. I think this is precisely the kind of thing that committees should be tracking. If they're going to be putting things on these budget requests, they should at least try to track them. Keep in mind, we do have a notes section in this table. Brendan, if you could move it over to the notes section, it will show something that Reshma was alluding to. Whenever the office hears about supportive housing, for example, we heard during the presentation that was made by Project Renewal about the New Providence shelter that 78 units of the new building will be supportive housing. So we noted that down and we made a particular priority to put it in here for future reference of the committee and all the board members. But again, you guys, there are over 50 of these and you keep adding them. So we do our best to try and keep our ears open for things that would be helpful and informative. But there's a lot of stuff that gets missed. So if the committees want to redouble their efforts to really, really put their ears to the ground and see, okay, let's look into this, or let's keep an eye, let's note something when we hear it, that would be a very, very, very big help. Because so long as the number of these things keep growing, these requests keep growing, we will be falling farther and farther behind trying to amass all this information. Also, it doesn't seem like people know this information is there. So again, in the notes section, many of them aren't filled out, but those that we have, we put them in. So for those who want numbers, I don't know how many units of supportive housing we have in this district. What we do know is that we have Kenmore Hall, which has been here for years, and in 3 to 4 years, when they're done rebuilding the New Providence shelter building, it's about any month now, it's about to start coming down. In 3 or 4 years, when it's done, the new building will have 78 additional units. But long story short, please look at the notes in these budget requests. If we have information that we've heard, it will be there. And 2, you guys got to talk with the other committees and say, look, if you want to put these on here and they're truly priorities, help the office do some digging on these things. Keep your ears open, keep your eyes open. When you hear something, send it to the office, send us links, send us videos, whatever you can, we'll put it in here.
And elected officials should be forwarding some of this stuff to you as well.
They have lots of stuff to do and oftentimes they don't. But there's a lot of should, people who should be doing things, but in the end,
Who oversees all this? I mean, it's not NYCHA. It's which city agency oversees this kind of thing?
I'm not certain. I would have presumed it was
Agencies
DHS.
listed. There's a column for agencies, and I think it is DHS, but let's confirm this. HPD.
Housing Preservation and Development.
Yeah.
Well, they should notify us.
They
Yeah,
have,
I mean-
they have 58 other community boards to also
I know.
Yeah.
liaise.
No. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Jesus in that it's incumbent upon us in terms of, for everyone who's on this committee, if you serve on another committee, like for instance, because I've been serving on the Parks Committee, before I ever became chair of this committee, I was always able to contribute to what was happening, right? Because sometimes that communication doesn't happen. Now, I reach out to every chair and oftentimes I don't hear back, or I'm told that, oh no, we want to keep everything the same as it is. Since I'm not on those committees, I don't know. But if you serve on another committee, please keep us updated on what might be happening. And also if you see this, like if you happen to be on the housing committee, make sure that at the next meeting in old or new business, you bring up this question and say that we want to track this.
And folks may not know this because I don't think Kyle has actually really said this out loud, but he has made a particular priority to structure the budget committee so that it has someone from all the other committees on it. Because it's important for the budget committee, since its work touches all the other committees, that there be some representation. So, I mean, we can't always help if members leave or something, but when he does the appointments, especially of newbies, his goal has been to make sure that there's always representation from all the other committees on the budget committee.
So.
All right, so should we go?
Language,
Yeah.
I would just say, if you can open it up again, I would just say CB6 asks that an additional supportive housing facility, or I would say facilities, housing facilities, be built in Manhattan CB6 with the state,
Allocated funds.
yeah, with allocated funds from the supportive housing that passed the budget in, I don't know what fiscal year it was last year. It's last year's budget. I would just say how that passed, or that has been funded through the state.
Yeah, that's good. That has been funded through the state.
And I would just say last fiscal year.
Yeah.
Careful with language like last fiscal year, unless you're going to be updating every single year, because then it'll surely, 2 years from now, it won't be true anymore.
All right. So I think that's good.
Same through New York State's budget.
Okay.
That would do it.
And I also would add that that's something that the committee can ask for an update from our state senator or state assembly person as well. Okay, so moving on to the next one. The ADA compliant subway stations. Anybody have any changes to this comment?
I just wanted to comment
Yeah.
that with the congestion pricing that's coming, that's slated for MTA capital expenses. This is something that's big, top of mind for the MTA, as they have pledged to make 95% of the system accessible by 2055. It's part of a huge lawsuit settlement that they had to do. So I just kind of want to note that this is something that we should keep on the MTA on, as the 14th Street L on 3rd Avenue is the only station, I think, that has not been budgeted in the MTA for an elevator in our district. And it sees over 1 million people a year. So it's a very important station.
No, thank you. And so in our comments, it's the 14th Street Station and the 59th and Lex, and I actually looked this up on their website last night. I don't know if you know more about this. I also put that as soon as possible, because 2055 seems like a long time.
Yeah, that's when it's fully, that's when they have pledged.
When will I be alive?
Yeah, it's it just costs an enormous amount of money. It's
Yes,
about $72 million per station
yeah.
for the elevators. So,
And that's for one elevator, right?
no, that's for both.
And there's 2 elevators.
So there'd be 2 elevators.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Usually the one that sits there is.
$36 million per elevator is, that's incredible. So,
Wow. I mean,
for reference, the city of Baltimore, I was just looking this up, installed an entire subway system's worth of elevators for $36 million. So we're looking at it for one station. So I think it's important to recognize just the colossal costs that are surrounding this.
And the total disregard for cost control.
Exactly.
New York City.
Yeah.
Jesus has a comment.
Just a comment. Roberto, if you've been doing research or you found sources that can help make our blurb more precise, by all means, let either Reshma know or send it to the office. And we can try and incorporate that stuff into the blurb. Or, if the transportation committee wants to make this a particular thing, they want to really, really watch very closely, they can. Just as a side note, this is one of the ones that was one of the blurbs that was a little bit more specific in that we say exactly how many stations are in our district, and we say how many of them are still to be worked on. But when working with the MTA and asking us, hey, can you sort of update us on this? Effectively, what they told me to do is to watch the MTA board meetings, like watch them as they happen. And, they may or may not talk about stations that have these sorts of projects in the pike. So, it's not super helpful. But I working for an agency myself, I can see where they're coming from. They've got a lot to do, but given that we are far more under-resourced than they are, that's not super helpful. So again, it's the office does what it can, but unless the committees want to scale back their ambitions or do a little bit more of the legwork, these things can be made better, but it's a little bit of a give and take. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that when you look at the response from OMB, when we put stuff that isn't very specific, their responses back to us are also like, we don't understand this kind of thing, and so that helps if we have more detail.
When they say like this request requires further study, like the response for this, like what are they getting at? Like, can we do anything about that, or like?
Yeah, and so, I mean, that's why I feel like in a situation like that, we were more specific, then they wouldn't give us that response. But again, I don't know the people, we get an email from them. I don't know who is the person there doing that. We had decided that we wanted them to come speak to us, and I did reach out, but we never got a positive response on that. But maybe that's something we can do in the spring again to try to see if perhaps we can get someone from OMB to come speak to us. Okay, are there any other items here that anyone has a change or comments or people, if you didn't have a chance to take a look at it and want to, we can click on it.
And just a quick note to the committee members in terms of the ranking, the new items by default are at the bottom of the rankings for the capital and the expense requests, just so people know.
Yeah, and then we will talk about, I wanted to see if we get all these comments, and then I want to discuss moving around the rankings. And then take people's suggestions for that into account too. And the one thing I'll add is we at Parks meeting last week, they did mention Sheena from the Parks Department had given us an update where many of the parks requests are going to be getting some funding, and projects are going to be starting soon. You heard about Albano where they're going to be having the pickleball courts, but there's other work that's taking place. We've kept these on the list for now because those projects have not started, but we got some positive news on our request. So if unless I want to go to the third one, where is provide more housing for seniors and the disabled, just because that's kind of related to the other conversation that we were having, and see if we want to change any wording here based on that, since it's related to supportive housing.
I'd hit the same point. That's my view. The governor's putting $5 billion a year over the next 5 years from last year to fund housing. including, like I said, the 10,000 units of supportive housing, and I think it was 100,000 units overall.
Yeah.
If I remember right, so I will hit that item. Yeah. HPD may not even be aware that there's funding available. They may be spending all this stuff upstate. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the way it should work is this state it goes into the city budget for a specific amount of money that the state's gonna give the city from whatever they've allocated, right? And that, I don't know, if it's going to the HPD budget, I mean, we'd have to take a look at that. But yeah, they may not know this, where the money they're getting, it's because especially for something like housing, you're getting money from the state, you're getting federal money, there's a lot of different sources of funds coming in. So is your suggestion here, we say that be funded from the allocations made by the state?
So can I ask one question which confuses me? What's the difference between supportive housing and senior housing?
So, I mean, I see what are you saying, that should be the same, because we're saying supportive housing for seniors in this request. Again, this came from the committee, and this is why I wanted to discuss this in relation to that other one, because is it too similar? Do you want to put similar wording?
I don't know how you distinguish this, because when I think of supportive housing, I think of the disabled and seniors.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if someone's reading this and reading the first one, if they would say, well, isn't this incorporated in the first one? And you could be a little more explicit in the first one by saying supportive housing for individuals, for seniors and individuals that are disabled. I mean, is that what we're trying to do?
I'm speculating, but I think supportive housing is more intended for people with mental health concerns or addiction issues, things like that. That's, as I say, I'm speculating, but I think that's the terminology.
Yeah, according to their website, they take the low income housing tax credit, state, city, and HUD finance departments. So it's mostly tax credit or state monies
going into this.
going into it. Yeah, exactly.
And I agree with Jim that I think when you say supportive housing, it is generally meant mental health, people's mental health issues and substance abuse issues, and then therefore this separate entry for the senior supportive housing that specifically maybe if there's seniors with those problems, you have special help for them, and then also disabled, but I would imagine you would have disabled in both categories.
Brendan, I'm sending you a blurb from the last year's budget request discussing this 25 billion and the 100,000 homes throughout New York State and 10,000 supportive housing units.
Noted. I see Jesus has his hand raised.
To offer some clarity, supportive housing, as we normally hear it, oftentimes refers to affordable housing for formerly homeless people who within the housing, the building or nearby, have social services built into the affordable housing so that they don't fall back into homelessness, or they can have a greater chance of success at launching themselves out of homelessness. It's typically different from standard affordable housing that is just housing that you would find anywhere, just at a lower price. Supportive housing, as the name suggests, has these supports built in or nearby so that people don't fall back into homelessness. That's typically what, when we're told supportive housing, that's typically what they mean. So supportive housing for seniors, I don't know who wrote this blurb, but if what they mean is formerly homeless seniors that we want affordable housing that has these supports in it, that's whoever wrote this, that's what they wrote. But that's what, when you say supportive housing, that's typically what people will understand.
Okay, so I don't know who wrote this either. It came from the committee. It has been there from last year as well. But I think we should try to reword this to be more specific based on what we discussed and what Jesus just said. And thank you, Jesus. So we don't need to, I don't think we can work on, Brendan, you and I can work on that rewording tomorrow, so we don't need to, even if it's getting 7:30 right now, so we can just go on to the next.
This is what Sandy was talking about.
No, Sandy's,
Oh, the
it's
other
the East Esplanade.
Right.
So for this one, the capital improvements to Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, is this in there twice? Because there's another request for the cameras. I had made a comment on that. For Dag Hammarskjöld.
It's number 8, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Nat.
Yeah, so, yeah, there's this capital improvements at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, which talks about security cameras, as well as fountains. Number 8 talks about security cameras at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. And then also an item that's in continued support talks about fountains at Dag, much like the capital improvements at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza.
So the Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza from Keith Power's office, capital improvements have been funded for that. The security cameras, I don't think have been funded. And the work has not started yet. So maybe, Sandy, do you know from Dag Hammarskjöld?
They said that the renovations were to start very soon.
Very soon, okay,
In November, I believe.
November, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that we should keep, perhaps because we have the fountains as continue, maybe keep that continuous support, get rid of this capital improvements and keep the cameras as a separate item since that didn't get funding.
Yeah. I'd kill that whole sentence about the fountains. It should be 2 separate items, the fountains.
Yeah, and it
security
is, fountain
cameras.
is there as continued support because that has gotten funding. Yeah, so I would say just delete this entry,
Okay, I will mark it
Yes.
as removed.
yes.
There is another line for security cameras, right?
Yes, yeah,
Number 8.
yes.
And everything else will move up one. This will be renumbered to after the committee meeting.
And then we're gonna prioritize tonight.
Yes, yeah. And just so for the new members, what happens is when we know something has gotten funding, in this case from Keith Power's office, we still keep it on continued support because we want to make sure that the project is, the money doesn't stop coming at some point or something. And once a project is completed, we take it off the list. And then, can we move to the new items?
These are the new capital.
Yeah, new capital.
New capital
Yeah,
items
yes.
specifically.
Yeah, so right now we're discussing capital, move to the expense and continue to support after. So the new items that we have here, most of them are from parks. And as Sandy had spoken earlier, there are 2 requests for Alliance for Kips Bay. So if you can look at those 2, Brendan. So one is access to water for the East River Esplanade from 36th to 41st Street. And does anyone have any changes or comments to this blurb here? Okay, so if everyone's okay with that, we'll move to the next one, which is the seawall reconstruction to the East River Esplanade. And any changes to this write-up? Because if no one has changes, I'd like to move these further up in our request, both of these items. One, you know, as we have this whole East River Greenway plan happening, I think it's very important that the sinkholes and everything, you know, this is pretty urgent that it get fixed. And given that we are seeing increased funding for parks projects, I'm hoping that this can get some funding sooner than later. So I'd like it to become a priority.
I mean, we discussed this last year, but I don't remember exactly how it works. So like, when we send this out, does like HPD's own projects are like the only ranking they see, right?
Yes, so what happens is we send it out and then OMB sends it to each of the agencies look at it and they come back. So HPD will only see what we, but our requests are with everyone else's HPD requests and our requests are parks. So then they'll just say on the corner, like it's from this community board.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking like how much like it matters, like putting like a DOT request above like an MTA request, or is it just like each agency's requests are ranked?
I see what you're saying, because like within parks, we rank it within that, like how, you know, how you do that. And that's a good point. I mean, I think in terms of our district needs statement, we should put like, what are the most important things for us in this district? And historically, since I've been on this committee, which has been since 2018, we have put more affordable housing as our #1 priority, or new park has been the thing. But I personally feel, especially having now looked at like the responses that we get each time, I feel like being more specific and asking for very specific projects that can be funded, we can get funding sooner for those, which we've seen with some of these other parks in the district. And that's why I want to move this higher up to reflect that this is something that we as a community board value for our community, but also because I think that perhaps we may get a more positive response for something like that. So then if we need to decide where we want to put them further up. So Brendan, if you can scroll back up. So right now, does anybody have a suggestion on where they think we should put this or have a preference? Jim?
Not with respect to that particular item, but I see there's a couple of Bellevue South and Dog Hammers Show both requesting security cameras. And I think there was another one I saw, I forget. I think we should have the security cameras as our highest priority for across the board, all 3 of them. Because that goes to the safety of our residents. And
so the thing with the security cameras, because this has been on for a while and we've talked to, you know, first of all, Park says it's not them, we need to talk to, you know, whoever, MPD or transportation or whatever. And one of the things is that even when the security cameras are there, they don't have someone to monitor the security cameras.
you know,
So it's an item that
The
is,
report.
yeah.
Kind of
And it is something that we get a lot of pushback on. I'm not saying we don't prioritize it for that, but to the point that I was saying, prioritize things that we think can, hopefully, we prioritize it, we ask for it, and we can get funding quickly for it.
You know, having the security camera also helps arrest any offender too. It speeds up the response time. I mean, how many people have been arrested just because they were caught on video?
Yeah,
I have a question
Yeah.
about this. It states, while I was looking at this, I was particularly curious at this method of how they are funded via these allocations from who are they funded by? It says here, for use within the districts of some sort of elected officials, but it doesn't say which elected officials.
this was security cameras? It looks
Yeah,
like-
yeah. The FY 23 response. So I'm just curious if you know who those people are.
Yeah, so the elected official that the park is in, so in the case of Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza, that would be Councilmember Keith Powers, for example.
Keith Powers gets a set amount of money just for cameras.
Well, Keith Powers is the council member
Right.
who we would be that we would be turning to, because I know the request as you know, I mean, just some of these requests in general, the response is talk to your council member about it. And I think,
So
yeah,
Doug,
and you know, this I think is one of them.
so Doug Hammarskjöld is already funded the cameras? You,
No, I mean, I heard, we can double check this, but I heard that the cameras had not gotten funded because of this issue of who would then be monitoring.
I don't think you need live monitoring. Look at that poor guy that was murdered with his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Last week, I guess it was.
Yeah.
You know, the only reason they caught him is because it was on video immediately, you know. I think it's important.
Jesus has a comment?
Yeah.
Jesus?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, that was a mistake.
Okay,
I
so,
think public safety should be our highest priority.
I agree.
I mean, a lot of these other things will take, you know, millions of dollars
yes,
to fully fund. These are things that can be done for, you know, $8, $10, $20,000. And you know, it's something we can say back to the community, well, you know, we got you these, we got you these, we got you this. That's my view.
I agree.
okay, so, okay, I can see can we move up to the current rankings we have? Can you go all the way to the top? Okay, so our first one is provide more supportive housing, and then we have the ADA compliant subway stations. So we moved, so we as a group feel that we should do, you know, I'm gonna make a suggestion, right, for what I start off with. I'm gonna, and then everyone else can comment, right? I would like the request, the two requests for Alliance for Kips Bay, which is for the East River Esplanade, to be our first two priorities.
So these two?
Yes,
What are
the access to the water at the East River Esplanade, and then the rebuilding of the seawall.
they?
Now, which one would be first and which one would be second?
I would do access to water.
But again, those are years away,
I mean, I think
right?
water could be pretty easy. I mean, they have a fire hydrant there right now that they're using, the weeds are dying.
Mhm. I understand,
Yeah.
I understand that. And maybe they can do that, but we've got a crime problem in the city. and a lot of assaults and, you know, those kind of crimes. More,
Yeah, so I'm gonna make I'm making this
Nature.
motion and we can vote, and then you can make your motion. So that's what I was getting to.
So I don't understand what your motion is. Where are you moving it?
So I would want the access to the East River Esplanade. Access to water on the East River Esplanade to be the number one, move it to number one.
Instead of housing?
Yes,
And what's the rationale again for moving that to number one?
so because it's something that we should be able to get access water pretty easily. I mean, there's a fire hydrant there. I don't know why they can't set up. And it's dangerous right now in terms of seawall, there's sinkholes. And for us to have a continuous East River Esplanade, right? Because there's the greenway has already been built, it'll be done by December. And this little area should be fixed so that people can bike, walk, and be able to go all along the path. The only part that would be blocked is the area by the UN.
So, I mean, I have a problem with that because housing and supportive housing has always been a number one priority. If you start moving that away, they think there's not the interest. And so we've been consistent with housing, and suddenly to put this, I understand your rationale, but I would never put that as number one if housing is the biggest issue we're facing.
I have a question. Is this
Yeah.
more of a quick wins and things that quickly get done and can have an immediate impact? Or is this more of a signaling mechanism to these agencies as to our top of mind, what is really pressing the community at this time?
So that's what we need to decide. And
Okay.
so like B and I are differing here, and we can, and I see her point of view too, which is
Yeah.
what we have been doing. And I was taking a different approach where the kind of the more the quick wins approach that
Okay.
you were saying, right? That things that I think perhaps we could get funded quicker. And similarly with Jim too, security cameras, perhaps we can get that funded quicker. I had this other issue with the security cameras that people keep on pushing back on. So we can, you know, we should discuss that as a group. What does everybody feel? And
But again, what does this priority list mean? Just because we can get it done quickly,
Right.
doesn't
Yes.
mean that it's priority number one, right? Like,
Yes.
I would say, like, get the work done. Someone on the committee can make sure that it gets done, but it might be a lower priority.
yes,
it's like
quickness of
prioritizing
it,
the Second Avenue. So,
But like,
yes,
it doesn't,
yes,
priority
Right.
doesn't mean we're gonna all focus on number one
Right.
first
Right.
before we do. So to me, the priority is, I agree.
yeah,
Quick, if there's investment money coming into the community in the next fiscal year, we need to move that up because we gotta be there with our hands open, ready to take the money that's available. So if there's something that's urgent because there's some money available, that should go up the priority list. Similarly, we should look at impact.
yeah,
What is the wider impact? You know, what's kind of the rubric that we're, the set of criteria? It should be like holistic, because this priority list is for us as a
Right.
community board. It's not
Right.
a checklist for some, like, it's not a to-do list, right? Like, we're gonna do number one first and then two, then, you know, so all of those factors should come into play as we kind of, in my view.
yeah.
But it
And so
also-
it's stating our values
Right.
as a committee. No,
It
I see
it
that's a good
also,
point.
it also signals elected officials, okay, who do not have billions of dollars or tens of millions to allocate. So something like security cameras, you know, oh, that's whatever it will be, $30,000, let's say. Yeah, I can fund that, and then I can take it home to my constituents and say, hey, look, I funded these cameras so that you're all safer than otherwise.
Yeah, so I would suggest we look at, community level of impact,
Yeah,
likelihood that it will be funded or supported or executed. And level of community of support should be kind of
Yeah,
another
correct,
dimension. Like, how is there a lot of community support for this?
yes.
Is like,
And so to that point, I would add two things. And the reason why I was thinking, not just these two park requests, I was gonna get to the other park requests too. So in the city's budget, right, and people have been advocating for parks funding, it's less than 1% of the budget. People had advocated for it to get to 1%, it didn't, but in the last 2 fiscal years, it has been more like 0.5%, which is higher than it's ever been. So we've seen increased funding for parks. There was more usage of parks. people during the pandemic started using it, and I think that we will see a decrease in parks funding as we get to the situation of where we need to be more conservative fiscally in the city, right? And so my idea was by putting the parks request earlier on, if we can get them funded before those cuts happen, it would be, perhaps worth thinking about. But I also see your kind of view on holistic approach. And you articulated that very well.
Well, I think also, Reshma, it's a political document to say our values. And I do think we are going to be facing with a horrendous budget and stuff. But I still think we have the principles of what we're looking for. And here you had state funding for housing. So you have a source of funding coming in that we should make a point of. But I also see your point of view with the park. So maybe we could do it a little higher, but not replace our first or second, which I consider politically directive, what we're really interested in.
No, and I see your point, B, and I think, Steve, you also articulated well. And yeah, so we can think about moving it higher up. And in terms of community support, and again, I also have a bias because I serve on the Parks Committee, so I've heard from all the community groups and parks, and perhaps maybe people are coming to the other committees I haven't heard it, but like the Lancer Kips Bay, the Sun Place Parks, the St. Barn people, they have shown up in large numbers, and they've shown up again and again to make their request for these projects. So I'd just like to.
The only other criteria I would look at is also, are there other sources of funding for these things?
Yes.
And that is the number for criteria I would use, is because there are lots of other sources for park funding, whereas like supportive housing.
There isn't. No, that's a
Really,
good point. Yeah.
This is the only way to do it.
Yeah. And you've
Supportive
emerged.
housing, you've got the state fund.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this in this instance.
Yeah.
I just had a question in line with what Steve and B were saying. I don't feel that we do enough tracking as to monies that are available before we start doing the prioritizing, that we should be matching more the monies available with what we already have on the list, even though there's certain things that are very important. They're important year after year after year, and they're high on the list, and they're not actually completed or taken care of.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we can track better, maybe what's in the press, the same way with the supportive housing and so forth, that we have a list of what's being allocated from whatever source, and then we work more on what we're doing now, so that we know that certain things will probably be addressed and taken care of, that we're requesting. I don't feel that we ever match monies that may be available. It's more, in some cases, of a hope list based on the need that we have, and we put it as number one. Are there any suggestions as to how we track the money in the beginning before we get to, here it is, okay, October, that we know there are certain funds that will definitely be there and then we can prioritize according to that.
So, we are planning for next fiscal year, right? Because the city takes into account, hopefully they're taking into account all our requests when they're making the overall city budget, right? The way we can track it, OMB does a really good job in terms of, what we have for our capital. We put in, they have this whole report from OMB where it talks about every agency capital request and how it's divided by each community board too, in which district.
And how much it costs.
Yeah, and so that information is online. And
right, how much it costs.
Yeah.
It's on there.
But that's not the same as how much money is available. And what I'm saying is there, maybe it's our own independent tracking that we do for Community Board 6 of what monies are likely to be there, not just the cost, but is there money there, even though they know the cost? Are there certain matches where we know what it's costing, and we also know that there's going to be money there before we're at this level where we're almost ready to submit? I just wanted to know if there were any ideas as to how to track the money. They're giving us basically what it's going to cost, or what the expense, the capital, or what the expenses, but we never see what sort of funds maybe, that's what I'm saying,
I mean,
funds
so-
that are actually
We don't
going
s-
to be there.
So they don't, I mean, they don't break it up. So you, if you look at the city budget, you'll see that this is how much money is being allocated to HPD. This is how much is being allocated to the Parks Department. And then in the capital funding report, you will see which projects now they're going to be funding.
But
Right
that's-
from that.
But
not
sometimes that,
ahead of time.
that's what
Yeah,
I'm saying,
yeah.
I'm saying ahead of time, okay,
Yeah.
once we submit it, then they
No.
can show what, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about money and priority, and if we can do a match in line with what these two gentlemen were saying.
Yeah, and the
also
thing is,
what
we
Steve
don't
was
know
saying.
what
At
money
this
we have
point,
right now.
Right,
Yeah.
at this point,
Because it's.
There's
because
no way
this is for next year.
That's what I would, but
Right.
there's no way in terms of the press, certain things that we might pick up in the press,
No.
that's not an announcement, or a formal announcement that we might at least have an
No, so we
inkling.
look at the
that we
quarterly
could-
reports, like the way I know, again, going back to parks, because again, that's what I followed closely here. The reason why I think that parks funding is gonna be going down is if you look at the quarterly budget and they project, I mean, right now they're projecting a cut across agencies, right? But each quarter when the budget gets updated, so while we don't know what's gonna happen because we're planning for the next fiscal year, we can take a look at the budget. Right now, there was a June budget, there'll be November modification that comes. We'll see what the city's shortfalls are and what requests they've made on which agencies for cuts. And sometimes it's every agency has to have a cut, sometimes they're cutting more from others. So we have some idea, but there's no direct tracking.
That's what I mean, so we're projecting for 2025. Which is to me a very long way away, even though that's what this is for.
Yeah.
There's no method that we could come up with. It's investigative, quite frankly, and it might not always be coming from OMB, but it seems that there would be, I don't know whether it would be committee within Community Board 6, that you're basically sleuthing to see where there may be maybe there's been a premature announcement, but it's not formal, or certain things that we as sleuths could find out before we get to this.
No.
But because
And you've got elections coming up in November, and you're gonna have a city council change come January. And that all has to be approved, the budget has to be approved by the city council.
right,
So
I'm
they're
not,
gonna have-
I'm not talking about approvals, I'm talking about prospective approvals. That's what I'm talking about, because we do this every year, and I just think that as V was talking about in terms of certain things that really should be advocated, or what Steve was saying that may be paid for, so we'll put it up there because it's cheaper. There's got to be a way that we find out.
Yeah, so there's no, there's no way to be exact, and the way the charter is set up is we are presenting our needs that go into the overall needs of the
Right.
city when they're formulating the budget. They don't say, hey, we have this much money, and then, in many ways, we also, with our community needs, we are advocating for our community versus other communities because there is a limited pool of money too.
I think to your point though, like, to Jim's point, first of all, you can't really get that much info, but I think it's incumbent on the specific committees to like even have those conversations. But I think there's like probably some amount of information of like, this is gonna get this start like in the design phase soon. But I think that's not something we can do because there's so many requests, to the point Jesus made earlier. I think it's really pushing it down to each committee and saying like, if you're at the parks, like what conversations are you having? What seems possible? I think it's still gonna get changed with every election, but that's probably the best way to do it, is pushing it down to the committees.
But I say, we can give them guidance, I think, to each
Yeah.
committee,
Yeah,
saying like,
that's
these are
what this is
these are
all
the things
about.
that you should be looking
Yeah.
at, it's like,
Yeah.
are there things available, quick wins, what's the impact?
Yeah.
How much community support does it have, that way they give us kind of more digestible information that's easier for us to kind of prioritize.
Yeah, and to the point that there's other monies allowed, I mean, the other monies we can get, we can go to our elected officials, right? We can go to, in this case, we mentioned how Keith Powers, Friends of Dag Hammarskjöld got funding from that. There's participatory budgeting. There's other ways of funding. The state assembly member, state senator can get us funding as well, in addition to these ways. Does someone have a question or a comment?
Yeah, so we were.
Who has
Sullivan,
the hand up?
CD6 member,
Okay, I'll let Ann speak.
and you should be able to speak.
Hi, I just wanted to mention, I've noticed in looking at this, I don't see in item, the item of closing the East River Greenway gap. That has always been, you know, pretty much one of the top 3 or 4 for like, am I missing it?
You're talking about the choke point at 14th Street?
No, I'm talking about everything from, you know, 51st to 48 or 54th. It was here. Let me. It was number 4, East Midtown Greenway to create from 54th to 59th. CB6 requests a plan for connecting the stalled 41st to 54th Street segment.
So don't we have it under continuous support?
I think so, because I see Brendan has put it.
Yeah, Rachel, you recommended that.
Yeah, I
this be
recommend,
moved
yeah.
To continue.
Yeah, I moved it to continue support because we do have the East Side Greenway. We did not, it didn't include the 41st Street. What we had there was after, it was 51st Street, what had been there historically.
So
41st Street there before.
yeah, that's fine. I didn't, it had always been a capital expense before, so I'm sorry that I missed that, because it was like, wait a minute.
No, I mean, thank you for bringing that up.
And this may be relevant to our conversation about UN access, because they're, I think, one of the issues here.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one part that we don't have access to, so.
Right. And we were so close.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to priorities, so I think that we are in agreement here then to follow in what B said, where we want to think of this as what are our values here and what do we think is the most important, and we want to keep the priorities are number 1 being the more supportive housing. And then the number 2 being the ADA compliant subway stations, and number 3 being more housing for seniors and the disabled. Are we all in agreement with that? I know that Jim has moved, I mean, we'll wait for him to come back, but I think that's what I heard from everybody else also.
I saw Brian's comment, he was basically saying it only matters for each agency, right? So it kind of doesn't particularly matter what we put first.
Okay.
Yeah, so then Rashmi, we could put the things that you want to do right after that, because you start with other parks. You start with capital improvement of Stuyvesant, so you are getting into parks.
Yeah. So then we can move, if everybody's okay with that, we can move the 2 Alliance for Kips Bay requests to after that, and then we'll wait for Jim to come back too, because he had the motion to want to move the security cameras up further as well.
So I was going to follow up on Jim's thing. Could there just be an item that says security cameras in the following parks as opposed to making them each separate?
Yeah, we could do that. We usually we've kept things separate for parks, each one separately. So to the extent that perhaps maybe some of it, because say it gets funded by a city council member or state assembly member, those areas might have a different representative.
One admin point, so like for the district needs statement, does that flow from here or is that like a separate ordering? Like
no, it flows from here, and it's a Word document, so there it has all, I mean, you've seen it, it's the words, and then, but we prioritize it this way, and you know, currently it starts off with in community board 6, and again, for the time I've been on this board, and even before, because I've gone back and looked at older ones, we always start off with, you know, we think we need to have more affordable housing, and then go on to the other stuff,
Point of question on number 11 is affordable housing is number 11 or whatever number it is now. 12. Why is it so low on the list?
Yeah, and I would argue that we should move that up, given what we've just discussed. And I think if you want
Yeah.
to suggest
I
that,
would
we can move on.
suggest that we,
Yeah.
I mean, affordable housing, as we know, is the top priority for the
Yes.
Manhattan Borough President. We've got a giant vacant lot in our district, which is a subject of some controversy, and affordable housing is one of those top priorities. I don't know how specific our requests have been in the past, but I would say just signaling important level of importance, it should probably be moved.
Yeah, so I think we should actually move that to 1 and then shift all the other ones down.
I agree.
Yeah.
What's that?
The affordable housing has got pushed to like number 11 after we were making the changes. So Steve was just saying that perhaps that should, given that we have a vacant lot in the district, as well as it's a priority for the borough president, that we can move that up.
What do we want
Which-
EDA, something they can speak to then? Or,
So I would.
Yeah.
So can you actually, well, I would ask everyone, so do we want to put the more supportive housing first and then affordable housing, or do we want the affordable housing first and then the supportive housing?
I would leave supportive housing first because that's a smaller chunk.
Okay. And then the affordable housing,
Mm-hmm.
and then,
That's my thought.
and then do we want to do the ADA compliant subway stations, or do we want to then stick with the housing and move the senior housing one up?
Move senior up and reverse it. Put the ADA right after it, so you have all housing.
Yeah, I would support that.
And perhaps putting the camera,
Yeah,
Okay,
and put the security cameras after that,
yeah,
like
before the parks.
all of them. Whichever security cameras are
yeah,
requested.
and while you were gone, B suggested that we combine those, but I had said that we should keep them separate. If a elected official is to fund it,
Exactly.
then we have the different elected
districts.
officials.
Right.
So does everyone agree then we want to move to security cameras?
yeah,
Yes,
So security cameras after the first 4?
yes. So,
Well, I thought security cameras after the parks thing that you put in there.
yeah, well, that was my suggestion, but the rest of the committee feels they want to put the security cameras first.
Okay, got
We go ahead of it,
all
yeah.
the security cameras, so we're sending it to NYPD, are they like, is that really, like, from reading the descriptions, like, are they really the ones that make that decision? It looks like it's elected officials, so what does sending it to NYPD do for us?
So we are not sending it to anyone, we're sending it to OMB, and then OMB breaks it down to which
Right,
agency or who is getting that.
so they're sent, so when it says agency here, is that what we're telling OMB to send it to, or do they decide separately?
They will tell us if we have the wrong agency, like it's that, yeah.
Cause yeah, I was just reading and I guess I don't under follow.
Yeah, in the response, they specifically mentioned that the NYPD has to do some sort of assessment
Yeah.
with the precinct, and then that goes back to the
Yeah.
electeds.
Right, but it's the elected who's deciding, right? It's not the
Yes,
NYPD.
yes.
The elected
Yeah.
who can fund them too.
Yeah,
And what happens
exactly.
is you get a lot of private security that businesses put up for themselves.
Yeah,
But when you've got a place like Dog Show Plaza, who's watching it? You
yeah,
know?
So the thing is, so the office management budget comes under the mayor's office, right? And they are saying it now, a city council member can come in and say, hey, I want this funded, and they have a certain amount of money
Yeah.
in to themselves, but there's also participatory budgeting. But if we say we want this sent to Keith Powers' office or Carlene Rivers' office, then OMB's gonna be like, well, why'd you send it to budget?
got it.
So which items are after number 4?
It is the security cameras, for, I guess,
All of them.
all of them is Bellevue South, Dag Hammarskjöld, and is there one other one?
So I see Doug Marshall, Bellevue South.
Right.
Let me do a search for this.
Wasn't there one form of project, night shift projects?
Oh, so that's a new request. So perhaps we should move that up as well. We haven't discussed this new request, it's from public safety. For DHS to have more security. It's not security cameras, it's security at the homeless shelters.
Yes. Incidentally, just for the record, a number of years ago, under Mayor de Blasio, we were assured that there would be no sex offenders at the First Avenue shelter, men's intake shelter. And if you go in Google that zip code for that, building in the state sex offenders registry. There are, I counted at least a dozen sex offenders, many of whom are repeat offenders and repeat sex offenders. So that's something I think public safety ought to take a look at. And some of them are like level, I forget all the levels, but I saw at least one or two that were level 1. So
So
extremely
it's something,
dangerous.
if anyone here is on public safety, you can talk to Matt about that issue.
Yeah, I've got a note. I have to
Yeah.
spend the time.
Okay, so we have the 2 security cameras moved up. Okay, and then after the security cameras, we have the 2 new requests from the Alliance for Kips Bay, the East River Esplanade, and the reconstruction
Right.
of the wall. And then let's take a look at, we can take a look at how the priorities go after that, right? The next one is the capital improvements to Stuyvesant Square Park. Which we've also been told by Parks Department that they are in the process of working on trying to get those underway. The public bathroom facilities, which is a request that we've had there for a long time. I thought this was very expensive. It cost $2 million to build a public bathroom, but then now that I know how much an elevator costs in subway station, I feel like bathrooms are pretty cheap. I always thought the 2 million was a big number. But it is something that is very necessary, but we haven't gotten many positive responses to it. But we do have new conference stations coming up in, as you'll see if you go further down, we had requests for comfort stations that did get funded in one of the parks.
I would just,
Oh, go ahead.
I would just like to note that perhaps we should be looking towards the food delivery companies or someone in this mess. Given the amount of people I've seen on the street lately who are driving for Uber Eats or DoorDash, who are just sitting on the streets and urinating on the streets. I've seen it multiple times in the district because they have nowhere else to go.
Wait, so you've seen delivery people urinating?
Absolutely. And it's because they have nowhere to go and they stand in front of the local deli and on 3rd and 26th Street, and the deli owner has complained to me hundreds of times because I'm in there all the time about this problem because they have nowhere to go to the bathroom.
Well, I think we have a resolution coming from transportation on that, don't we?
Oh, we do at the full board tomorrow?
I think so.
Okay.
Great.
Can I just see that on the capital improvements at Stuyvesant Park, what's the nature of the capital improvements? It says public safety. You know, what specifically is requested? If it's another camera thing, we should, yes. Security cameras. So that should go with the rest of the.
Yeah.
We should probably split it, right?
Well, this includes security cameras, but includes a number of other
What's the others?
items. So it mentions.
Environmental
electrical
health upgrade, would that be it?
LED lighting, irrigation system. So yes, it includes security cameras, but also a number of things in addition to security cameras.
Why did they combine them? Who did that? Parks?
Yeah, it's Parks and it's a request that's been there a while. We,
They need to be more discreet in these budget requests.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
I would be open to splitting it to your point, Jim, because then we can send it to the right.
I would too.
yeah, so I mean,
Can we split it?
we can split it, we
Yeah.
can split it.
Let's split it and put the cameras and everything and with the other.
Brendan,
cameras.
is that okay? Cause you gave me a look, I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just, the committee needs to be clear as to like what it's split into, because, you know, there are multiple things here. There's
Yeah.
You know, there's the security cameras, there's restoration of buildings, there's LED lighting, there's navigation systems, so there are multiple things
I
going
would
on
just
here.
put the security cameras.
I agree.
for
Yeah,
now.
I think it's just taking the cameras out, making its own request and then leaving everything else the same.
Yeah, so just that one sentence that says security cameras should be placed at each of the park's 8 entrances, make that a separate request for Stuyvesant Square Park, and then everything else stays.
And who's setting parks these days?
It's Neil Barclay.
Okay, right, okay, all right. We'll
Excuse,
talk to Neil.
excuse me, would environmental health upgrades be a euphemism for possibly putting more public access to toilets or something of that nature at Stuyvesant Park? Is that what environmental health upgrade stands for? Or does it cover a whole umbrella of things?
Yeah, so,
Could it include what you addressed?
yeah, I mean, we can ask them that. I don't think so from being in those meetings. You know, usually when it's public restrooms, I mean, they refer to as comfort stations in park and they come as a request for a comfort station, which was not. So, we can go back and, you know, either talk to the people from Stuyvesant Square Park, because the Friends of Stuyvesant Square Park, we can reach out to them, but also look at the minutes, or because all the meetings are, for the last 3 years have been on Zoom, you can actually just go look at the meeting and find out exactly what they meant by that, but I'm pretty sure it was not comfort stations or bathroom.
And there would be no way that we would be able to mention that with what we're requesting now. It's too late. Is that correct?
What do you mean? And like,
To insert some of that.
so we don't know though if they wanted that there, right?
So
So
we
we
have
can,
to go back to committee.
it has to go back to committee to find out if they wanted to have public restrooms in there.
I just have one aside.
Yeah.
You had mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that now there will be a representative from every committee that will be part of this committee.
Budget.
Budget, I mean, that's how,
When-
yeah.
Because we could have been discussing that with someone from Parks if there was a representative here that would have known now whether or not we would be able to insert that. So
No, I serve on the Parks Committee, and the problem is that some of these requests are old, so like some of the new ones, like if you ask me about Sutton Place, some of the other things, oh, I just read about it, but the Sky Square Park, I can't remember, that's what I was saying, I'd have to go back and look.
right, so when will we have some of these representatives so that we wouldn't have to go back and forth, that the representative would be right at this meeting, that we could address that while they're here, and maybe even if we couldn't actually put it in today, that we would have someone from that committee that would be able to give us some pertinent information, that maybe there would be a possibility that at the next meeting we would be able to insert it.
So, you know, we do this process once a year. The Parks Committee, usually it's the chair of each committee, like I reach out to the chair of each committee, and sometimes even the individual committee members may not know. It's the chair that knows, because people often reach out to people. And in fact, even today, Kyle said, hey, I didn't see this in the budget request, because the community group had gone directly to Kyle and didn't even come to any committee, right? So unless, now we have a full board meeting, we can go to full board tomorrow, and somebody from housing or someone from parks or someone from that can say, hey, you know what, I see this language, but this should be different, or this included this, and then that we can make that change. And in this situation, it's what the committee is doing is putting in requests. The people from Stuyvesant Square Park came to the committee and made a presentation, and they took what they made from that presentation. So we can't assume what they wanted, right? We have to find out.
There was a time several years ago when there were the chairs from a number of committees were on this committee.
Yes.
Is that something that we're going to have happen again? Because that was something that made it more efficient when actual chairs of the other committees were sitting here at this meeting. Is that what is going to happen from what you had mentioned at the beginning of
So,
this meeting?
yeah, so I don't,
Just on
yeah, but you
just on
Jim being-
information,
yeah.
the reason that committee
Yeah.
chairs only have to serve on one committee was for that reason, as I recollect. Because they were supposed to also come to the budget. committee.
Yes, that's right. They were supposed to serve on at
So
least
that was
two
before
committees.
my time, because
Yeah.
that's not, yeah.
They used to have to serve on at least two
Yeah.
committees.
Well,
So,
Stay
no,
here long enough. you'll see.
yeah, well, everybody, I mean, everybody is required to serve on two committees. What you're saying is if you were
The
a
chairs
chair,
are not.
I don't
right?
know. No, I mean, I serve on two committees. I'm a
They
committee
were
chair.
at one
By
time.
volunteer?
I just thought I had to. I didn't know. Yeah.
At one time, a committee
I think
chair
it's-
had to serve on at least two committees. So that there used to be committee chairs at these meetings.
Right.
So
Right.
Parks was always at this meeting.
Yeah.
Always at this meeting.
So thank you for that clarification. I didn't know that. I just go back, it was Jesus who said that Kyle has purposely put people on this committee who serve on another committee as well for this reason.
Can you, when you do your committee report tomorrow night, can you advise the entire, or maybe you can do it during the executive committee meeting, to tell all the committee chairs or their committees to make their requests discreet and not omnibus with, like, you know, health, security cameras and health and whatever else was in that Stuyvesant Square one.
Yes,
You know,
I
make
can't,
it-
I
yeah.
can, there is a lot of pushback on that, I would just say.
Discreet,
Yeah,
it shouldn't be.
yeah,
If it's one project, it should
Yeah.
be fine. Can I get a cookie?
yeah, let's take, I got him, and I don't wanna take him home.
The whatchamacallit's broken. So I got some coffee.
But thank you, Eva, for bringing that up, because that's a discussion to have. Again, it's the chair of the entire community board that makes that decision. As you said, Kyle has tried to put people from different committees on this. I was not aware that committee chairs used to come to budget committee meeting. That's something that, thank you, Jim, for pointing that out, and perhaps we should be doing that going forward.
Maybe I'm misremembering it. Ann just said that. they
So Jim,
also-
it's not in the bylaws.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah, B is our bylaws expert. Yeah,
Was.
was.
Right.
It says people have to serve on two committees, but it's not very specific.
Well, maybe.
They don't have
Maybe
to
when
serve
we-
on the committee, they can attend this
Right.
one meeting where we are priority.
Yeah, we're prioritizing things.
Yeah,
I mean, no,
exactly.
we can make that request. Since I've been on, that has not happened.
And
Yeah.
maybe do it, you know, the end of, like, in the June meeting, that way we can get all our stuff together for the October meetings.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. So I think if you have to move on to expenses, or this is gonna go on all night.
Yes,
No.
yes. Okay, should we just discuss the couple of new capital, we have more new capital things, the other two, and just make sure we're okay with this ordering here?
Yeah, there's been a lot of reshuffling.
Oh, reshuffling, yeah, so I
to
just wanna,
Make sure you all are okay with the ordering.
well, the security camera should be up with the other ones. Oh, is it up there now? You put it to the 7, 8, yeah,
Oh,
it should be number 7.
so you want number 9 right now, the new security cameras at Stuyvesant Square Park to move to number 7?
And put them all together.
Yeah, they're all the same
Yeah.
type of.
Yeah.
So I guess reversing 7,
And 9,
9.
Yeah.
Okay.
okay,
This is, I appreciate you all checking.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, and then we move on to that, then we have the capital improvements, we have the bathroom facilities. And just,
Sorry, I think access to water should be above seawall construction.
yeah, so flip 8 and 9.
Sorry, yeah.
That's fine.
Well, hold on, wasn't the seawall reconstruction kind of a priority because it's more desperate? That was my understanding from.
We can do it, this is how we had before.
Yeah, that's what we had before, we can switch it, I mean, the water is important too, but the seawall, given that there's sinkholes perhaps, yeah, so we can flip it back.
So flip it the other way around?
Yes, yes, I'm sorry,
So,
Brenda.
seawall
There's a multiple viewpoints.
The seawall construction is 8.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The access to East River Esplanade is
9.
9. Okay.
Okay, then we move to Sty Square, through the bathroom facilities, the Asher Levy, we didn't hear back from them, right, Brendan, on that from Sheena? On whether that was done or not?
Not beyond what I informed you.
Okay, yeah, and in that in her response, she said she was waiting to hear back from them, so, okay. So then we have a new park in Community District 6, then we have capital improvements to Peter Field.
What's the nature of those new improvements? Because it's greened in now. Petersfield is a green field now, mostly.
Yeah, it seems to be very focused on basketball court related
Right, there's-
matters.
Okay. So, I mean, it's been, the AstroTurf did, I don't know, a couple of years ago.
Is Kevin O'Keefe still on the call? He was on earlier because he used to be chair of parks. And some of these older requests he may know because he would have been the one who drafted those.
We should have all these committees go in like in April or May and vet these and see where they stand.
No, I have been emailing people since April.
No,
and
no,
talking- And
I
talking to
know.
people. One of the problems is one of the problems is when you have new chairs too,
Yeah,
they don't know because they don't know the institutional, I mean, I gotta say Brendan is amazing because if it wasn't for his institutional knowledge and his organizational skills, we wouldn't even be where we are right now.
No, I
But
understand.
yeah, because he just remembers so much. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
But
Thank you, Brent.
I would leave it the way it is.
yeah, also like going to Jesus's point in terms of looking at these requests, look at the responses that that the city has given to us. And as you can see, the most recent responses, it's recommended that this be brought to our elected officials. Just reading responses to these requests over the years, if this were a complete request, then we would have been told as such.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I thought that they had done a lot of it. I'll look at it tonight when I walk home.
Don't play basketball.
I don't play basketball.
I was a wrestler, I wasn't a basketball player.
I thought you played with your kids.
Huh?
Didn't you
No,
play
my
basketball?
kids are a whole lot more athletic than the old man. They play with their friends for basketball. I did teach them to wrestle and box.
And
That
so
whole thing.
Brian says that the Petersfield is a new artificial turf.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it is. But there's an area that they have reserved for the basketball
Well,
courts on the west side of the field.
yeah.
And that had been ruddy and grouted and what have you, but I can't imagine that they greened the eastern half. Or eastern 3/4 and left the 1/4, you know, with the potholes.
Right,
and
so we
things that
can
he
take
saw.
a look, but there had not been any
Yeah,
updates
I'll take a look at it.
to that in the parks meeting. And again, it could be an old request. And like I said, then there's not that continuation of people knowing what
Yeah,
originally happened. Similarly, the repair of the 25th Street Bridge. Again, I think if you look at the comments, that's something that hopefully is being done with the East Side Resiliency Project.
that's also supposed to be coming up.
Yeah, coming up.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I mean, we're scrolling down this to see if anyone has any strong feelings about moving any of these items. I did want to take a look at the new items. And there's a few other new items and see if we want to move them further up. It's similarly renovations to Sutton Place Parks. And the Sutton Place Parks Conservancy, it has a specific request for $2.6 million. They've already done a study and have plans in place for what renovations they require. The other portions of the Sutton Place Parks have been renovated and this one section hasn't. And it's been subject to vandalism and because it's being under use. And so again, something that I feel that if it can be prioritized, it helps improve that whole area because it's just one part of these parks that hasn't been improved. So I would recommend moving that up if other people agree.
And if you could clarify.
I think
Rachel,
it makes sense. I think it makes sense.
Yes. And Brendan, you were saying something?
Yeah, just if it could be clarified where the committee wants this request moved to ranking wise.
Yes. So I would want it further up in the parks, it kind of right after where we do the Alliance for Kips Bay.
So. So basically around 10
Yes.
or so.
Yeah, so let's make that,
10 or 11, yeah.
yeah.
So I'll make a note of that. Just making a note
Yeah.
to myself.
One change I would want to make is moving like bus parking above Second Avenue subway phase 3. I just feel like bus parking is something that could happen.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I am okay with moving it. Anyone have any issues with moving that above? Flipping bus parking in the phase 3 of the Second Avenue subway? Okay, so you can flip that then.
Yeah.
And then among the other new items, we added AD accessibility at all parks. So similarly to the subways, not all our parks are AD accessible, and you know, I think that should be a priority for us to have that. We can keep it where it is, but if somebody feels we should move it up, we can do that. Because if it's taking, you know, I mean, this is something that will take time to get all the parks up to accessibility, but I think it is something that needs to be stated and prioritized.
Most of them are accessible, it's just that the roadways and the walkways are beat up pretty badly, so if you're in a wheelchair, you can get stuck.
Can I just ask a question about the item related to the new senior center? Because the notes on there explain that seniors do not want to frequent a center, and so I'm curious why this request is still there.
But can you pull up that note? And I did not see that when I read this.
It's in the notes
Yeah.
section. It says that statistics cited by the Health and Education Committee at its September 24th, 2019 meeting indicates that 90% of seniors do not wish to frequent senior centers, but would prefer instead to take advantage of programming at libraries and other non-senior specific facilities.
Yes.
But yeah, so Steve
But
brings a
we're
good point,
still
then why do it
asking
for a
about-
senior
why are we
center? Why
asking
asking for a senior
That's
center?
a question.
That's a great question. And I can't believe I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, that's the sort of questions that committees should be asking.
Asking, yes.
I mean, isn't it just that like they have funding for 25 senior centers, so why don't we just get one of them anyways?
And we were told that there was going to be a new senior center in our district.
So I think there's a difference in a senior center that feeds meals and a senior center that doesn't. So I'm not too sure that that is completely correct. Because seniors of lower economic means tend to go to centers.
Especially at meals.
The lunch becomes the important thing, and they do some programming after that. I've seen that in a lot of the senior centers in Manhattan. So
But if you
I would
see-
question that response.
What's the statistic?
But if you scroll further down, let me try to scroll it here, because it says why the committee, because apparently there's disagreement on the committee, so if we can read that part of it.
Oh, I see they couldn't reach consensus. I just lost it.
Yes, that part was cut off, so I couldn't read it either.
Yeah, it says the committee was unable to reach consensus about removing the request. Instead, it recommends making the request for a new center a low priority. But now we have a long list of things that's
So I mean, we
higher
should put-
than a lot of some other things on here, so I'm questioning where it should go on the.
Yeah.
priority list, or if it should be there at all.
I mean, it's the only request we have for the DFTA, so I don't think it's bad to leave it on.
okay, we can make
I
it
would,
last
I would leave it on. I would leave it on.
and make it last.
Yep.
Yeah.
Here's a senior center utilization report from all the city's agencies.
Well, the Department of Aging has a lot of information on this too.
Weighted service utilization goes from 100% to 66% to 3%. This is all over the city. It doesn't have any, it's not broken out by community district. Average daily participants.
Okay, can you, the other new entry for Peter Detmol, can you read the description? Because we got that update from Parks Department on some of the work that's already done, so I just want to make sure.
Number 28.
Yes. Okay, so this is different than what upgrades were made previously.
Yeah, it was, upon looking at records, and I'll show you, so. Well, actually, no, it was removed a different year, so. never mind
Yeah,
that,
but if you have the email, did I CC you on the email that I sent to Kyle saying what's gonna start in October at Peter Detmol Park?
Yes,
Yes, and actually I can pull it up on my phone too, the last email. that I
so what
sent.
was done previously, was focused on water fountains.
Yeah.
Well, here, it sounds like the issues are with the dog park and with other infrastructure issues. I wasn't clear exactly which infrastructure issues, and that might be worth making clearer.
Yes. So we'll keep it on for now. We will ask Kyle if there's more details. And as you saw in that email that I sent to him, that it would be good to have the community members who spoke to him to come speak to the Parks Committee directly, so we would get that kind of detail. Okay, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't, what they were asking for wasn't something that is already done, which it isn't. And so I think then we are at the end of the capital request.
And I should note that there are a couple of items here that are listed as removes.
Yes, so one is the capital improvements at Dag Hammarskjöld, which we broke out into two different requests. And the other one is this build affordable research lab space and incubators, and that's been on for the last 2 years, and I haven't gotten anybody who has given me any information on it or where it's come from. So that's why it's marked for removal, and I emailed the committee chair and didn't get a response back as to why we should keep it. So I've suggested remove it unless someone here knows about this project and can say why we should include it.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of like the EDC.
Yeah, I mean, it's
That
with
was
that.
I think that was the original purpose of it.
Yeah.
Was, just because the cost for startups,
Yeah.
we'd rather have them in Manhattan near the hospitals than in Jersey City, doing it cheap, because like, for example, there was there's a biotech startup, I think on Roosevelt Island, that was talked about almost 10 years ago at least. There's a lot of I think there's a purpose to it. Whether or not I agree with purpose, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Just
so I mean, the
walk.
Alexandria Center is there right now, which does have
Right.
some startups in it.
Right.
Um,
But usually these guys, you know, they can go to a VC and
Mhm.
if they've got something worthwhile, the VC will fund it. So you're just kind of giving more money to the collaborators and the founders.
so, I mean, so what I'm hearing is, I don't think anyone has an issue with removing this item or has any information on
I
what
don't.
it was supposed to, okay. All right, so we move on to expense budget. And then, if you want to take a look at the ordering of this and to see if we want to move any of this around.
PEP officers is parks officers, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Parks Enforcement Patrol.
Yeah.
And I mean, the one thing I can say, given that we did have this, thing that was shared by Robert about the bathroom facilities, there's this funds to research and contract restroom and shower services.
Mhm.
If perhaps we want to make that more of a priority than we have right now.
Absolutely. I also would like to point out the additional traffic enforcement officers. I think that the bus lanes, for example, I take the bus often, and the bus lane enforcement has really gone down lately. And they're just short-staffed because of all the traffic, and there's more cars than ever. So I think that we need to move that up as well.
Yeah, I'd support that, but
Yeah, I'm good with that. People always end up blocking the express. I mean, they created that 42nd Street busway for a reason, but it doesn't, yeah.
also keep the Vespas out of the bike lanes.
Absolutely.
So I do have one question about home care services in CD6. Where does the money come from for that? Isn't it from Medicaid?
Mostly, I would think.
So.
Yeah,
So isn't that funded by the state as opposed to the city?
I thought there was a city program to also do that.
I'm looking at the notes, it talks about home assistance programs for the elderly in Manhattan Community Board. So I was trying to see who does the funding of this. Because
Yeah.
we're talking about subsidized nursing homes, which would be Medicaid funded.
yeah, so I mean, it's DHS is this agency listed, but the way, Brendan can answer, good.
Yeah, just going off of the agency responses, it looks like it's federal and state, which is
Yeah.
why a lot of years we get a response from, I think it's Department for the Aging saying approval depends on sufficient federal and state funds.
Yeah. In the way,
I know this comes from the HHS budget federally. So I was wondering who we're asking for the money, because it actually has to come from the federal level down.
yeah, and so to Brendan's point that it says that it depends on our sufficient funds from federal and state funds, but New York City does, this state Medicaid funding, there are certain counties that do get their own control over their portion of Medicaid funding, and the 5 boroughs do have that.
Jesus has it.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, Jesus has his hand raised.
So it's DFTA, Department for the Aging. That's the agency that this request gets sent to. It has been on for like 4 years or so, at least. It came out of the Health Committee. I will say, to be perfectly honest, I have never seen this topic on the Health Committee's agenda in the entire time since they proposed this as a budget request. So it leads me to ask, how much of a priority is this really?
Yeah, so Jesus, I think I know this area, and the reason I'm raising this is the way funding comes down and the allocation, I'm not too sure what we're really asking for. So I leave it at that.
I mean, given that, I would make a motion to remove this, given that information. Do others agree, disagree with that?
I don't know anything about it.
And especially if it's not been on the agenda and it's been there for 4 years, and I did not hear back from the committee on this matter either when I asked about it, so.
Is this for seniors only, or is it also for the disabled?
It says over age 65. They're focused on the population over age 65.
Yeah.
I mean, New York State has medically needy, which is, more than the low income. I just don't see this as a subject that we've been talking about at all for the last couple of years. So I was surprised to see this one.
Okay, so we're marking it for removal.
I see Jesus's hand is raised again.
Oh, Jesus.
Sorry, just a comment. I think this might also illustrate a very teachable moment. I think committees sometimes, and maybe the budget members here can go and spread this in their committees, but these blurbs, they really, really, really matter because, we do our best to write notes, but again, most of these don't have notes. Only a few of them do whenever we happen to catch something. And unless we're going to sort of put narratives in there in the notes about this is why the committee chose this, and this is what they actually mean, and this is why, they decided not to remove it, and this and that. Unless we're going to do that, which I don't think is realistic, these blurbs have to stand on their own. And, OMB gives you a limit, 800 characters, and that's it. So you have to be concise and you have to be super clear, because not only do future iterations of the budget committee have to understand what these things are talking about, but all the agencies, OMB, they also need to understand. So I think this sort of proves that we need to really work on our blurbs, and the committees really need to sort of redouble their efforts to try and really deliver on these blurbs.
Yeah, and I would emphasize that we need to bring that up because oftentimes I have emailed committee members or talked to them or the chairs of different committees, and they say, no, we want to keep all these items on. Do you have changes? No changes. And then I've gone in, there's some that had, oh, well, in FY 2019, or because of the COVID pandemic, and I went and changed those, and which I did last night, and Brendan updated it, right? Like we took out a lot of that old dated language because we didn't get those updates from the committee. So again, if you're serving on a committee, make sure that you bring that up.
Brendan, you had one on there. I just saw remove twice per week composting. That was actually, was that on from last year?
Yes, it was you had added it, and then you sent an email in the summer to say we can remove it now that it
I
passed.
did? No, I put a resolution. I sent you an email
Yeah,
to have the
resolution.
resolution.
But I thought then we had a conversation because it had passed, composting had passed.
No.
And it
Create
was,
mandatory citywide curbside composting, but they're only talking about once a week. So you're gonna keep old garbage hanging around in your apartment or in your compactor room or wherever for a week. You're gonna get rats and vermin and everything else.
okay, so then we keep this on. I'm sorry, I
Absolutely.
misunderstood.
Oh, yeah, you must have.
But you
I
also,
wrote
you
a
also,
resolution.
yeah, and the resolution
Okay.
had 3 times, not twice, actually.
Right,
So
I would
we
prefer
did it
3 times, but I'll take what I can
So
get.
what, we can ask for 3 then, because that's what the resolution you had put together had said.
Yeah, but we didn't vote on it. It was.
No, it hasn't voted, but we can add it here. It doesn't have to be voted
All
on.
right, so let's do 3. Oh, no, I never wanted to take it out.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood then.
Cause my building has 230 units and maybe 10 to 15% of us compost. We fill 2 bins. But everybody has to keep their garbage until the Monday when they pick it up. And it's just gonna be
No, that's, I mean, it's a valid point that it's gonna be hard for people to keep it for that long.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just a quick ranking note, I have it as the bottom ranked item of the month, but you know, these can be moved around and up and whatnot. I just want to make sure it's not listed as removed anymore.
Yes,
That's
so I would recommend moving it up. Given that we're about to, Manhattan has not started its composting, Queens has started it, Brooklyn is about to start, that this be something that the city consider as they're starting composting. It's a
Yeah,
pretty important part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think you're gonna get a lot of support on that from Redney and a lot of the other
yeah,
companies, a lot of the other residential housing
yeah.
people.
Yep, just let me know.
Yeah, so where do we want to put it? So we go, can you go to the top of the expense? Let's see.
Oh,
Should we put it at,
well, we put it before it expands senior programs,
okay,
So at 4,
yeah,
yeah. Just insert. What's ACS prevented? Do we have a lot of that?
a lot
If we do,
of,
it should be a higher priority. A lot of kids that are being separated from their family for whatever reason.
in our district,
Yeah.
I'm honestly not sure.
yeah.
What are you looking at, Jim?
I'm looking at,
Number 38 or 39, I think.
yeah, I
it is,
don't know the number.
Well, we're currently looking at expense requests, it's expense request number
So 6, yeah.
6 or so. I
Yeah,
think the
6 is fine. No, I just want to make sure it had a high enough priority.
It's,
I didn't realize that we had that many of those kind of situations in our CD. Well, I guess we do.
We
and
do,
it's, yeah.
yeah. So can I ask about the item, about the library item, which is 13? Why are we focused on baselining when it's been all the cuts for the libraries? I don't understand the write-up that says baseline current library funding.
Yeah,
That
so,
means if it's lower, you're gonna baseline it lower.
so we should change that. This request is an old request that has been there and has not been changed from when we did have more library funding. And as you know, we've had a cut in library funding and had that library in our district even closed.
Yeah, that's why it doesn't make sense to say it should be baselined at current levels.
Yeah,
And then increase to address upgrades in resources when budgets allow. I think you want to bring it back to where it was before and even increase it because of the value of libraries. So I was very concerned with the language of baseline.
so I would propose, I mean, there's 2 ways we can word this. We could say baseline library, go back to library funding to what it was in FY 2019, or we
You
can
can
say.
say restore, you can say restore and increase.
Yeah, restore and increase. Okay, so change baseline to restore and increase. Get rid of current, and it's basically restore and increase library funding.
So restore increased library funding,
Restore and increase.
And increase.
and then the blurb,
Okay, so let's,
That's traditional.
okay, so we can, I mean, the social distancing part, I don't think is necessary really.
I think you could play with the last sentence that we asked at the budget for New York Public Library, and particularly for branches in our district. Take out the word be baseline, be increased. to address upgrades to resources. And leave out when budgets allow.
So just end it at resources.
Yeah. I'm talking about the value of public libraries to our residents of CB6.
And I'm guessing deleting the sentence involving
Yes.
social distancing.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, the funding has not been baselined in the budget, making reliance on future amounts precarious.
Yeah, that I'm trying to see, that doesn't make sense.
In the budget, comma, making reliance on future amounts precarious.
Making a reliance on future amounts precarious.
So is Jesus still on the phone?
Yeah, Jesus is still on.
So Jesus, look at item 17. Are we still talking about budget increases for community boards?
I'm still talking about it. Members, as far as I can tell, are not, but I am. Every chance any elected official will listen. I will say I talk more a little bit about the facilities than I do about budget increases. There are some community boards that are more gung-ho on budget increases, but back in February, I testified at a hearing, a government ops hearing, in which we raised the budget increase question. So we try.
So I was really focused on budget increases to deal with facilities for meetings.
Those are two separate requests for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that comes further down. There is that other request.
Yeah. The reason I'm raising this is, I guess the last 2 years we've turned back money. So I raised that as a request, just as a comment.
Those days may be over. I'll say that. The projections that I've been doing for this fiscal year, we may not be doing that very much in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Suze, have
Yes.
you guys looked at going fully remote and using using the what do they call it? One of those office services spaces for things like this?
Like co-working?
What do they call it? I forget the name of it.
WeWork?
Such a big change like that, we don't have the authority to do unilaterally. So what would happen is, the way our budget is structured, if the city were to somehow agree to do that, which it would not be practical given that you guys would then have no place to meet for your committees. If the city were to agree to do something like that, and we were to find other places to meet, what they would just do is take away our rent budget, and everything else would likely stay the same. So that is not I don't think that's a workable solution.
That's what I mean by WeWork, or maybe a like a co-working, like, for example, we're meeting in the evening, but Senator, who's the senator who has an office in this building?
Senator Kruger.
Yeah, Senator Kruger has her office up here. Maybe she has a conference room or something like that. I'm just, throwing out ideas where we could spend more on staff and services than for space.
The budget doesn't work that way. It's a completely separate budget that is particular to every community board. Like, for example, Community Board 1 doesn't have a rent budget because they are lucky enough to be in a government building. We have to rent our space, so we do have a rent budget. But also, I think it may set a bad precedent too. I mean, we are already the redheaded stepchild of city agencies, and sort of being bereft of an actual proper government office would, I think, only further stigmatize, I think, community boards and make us even and diminish us. But we need it. It's the office space. We do work here, and we hold your meetings here, and it comes in handy.
Brendan has come.
Yeah, kind of related to that, without having an office space, we wouldn't have a space to have this meeting.
Yeah, and I don't consider, looking at what we pay for rent to do this, we could, if we had to use other places, it would be a lot more expensive.
Yeah, I have a question. So when we return money that was allocated to us, then that just gets back to the city's general fund?
It's the
not like
city, it goes to the city, you don't keep it.
Yeah, so you can't use it for future years.
No.
Nope.
Yeah. There's a comment by Brian in the chat. Did that request come from strategic planning?
I
Brian?
think that was with regard to a different budget request.
Okay, all right, that's,
Brian's hand raised up.
okay, can we let Brian speak so he can say what he was talking about?
Yeah, Brian, you should be allowed to talk.
He was referring to the incubator space one. And actually, no, the history behind that is it actually originated in the land use committee years and years and years ago. And then they didn't seem, they kind of like didn't seem to want to keep it. So it ended up in the business affairs committee. But yeah, no one really seems, the way I see it, no one really seems very passionate about it.
No, there was no one seemed to know about it or comment about it. I asked around and therefore then I made that decision yesterday that we should remove it.
Which one?
This is the incubator space.
Oh.
Yeah.
For expense number 20, comprehensive census. They gave us the response, this is not a budget request. Should we like either tailor it or just get rid of it?
Yeah, I mean, if they say it's not a budget request, I would, what committees gave that to us? Can you scroll?
Housing.
Oh, is that housing?
Comprehensive
Yeah.
Census of facilities. Did Brian have something to say?
I think he already spoke.
Comprehensive census of facilities, what?
Serving homeless New Yorkers.
That seems like it's something they would have.
Yeah, I mean, DHS does that already, but also many of the nonprofits that serve the homeless population, also you can get that information online, but I would be curious to, I'm sure there's missing parts of this, though, and that's what this request came from.
Maybe they're just general.
Yeah. Okay, so
All of facilities in our community district.
So the genesis of this was that the board was starting to feel that we are overburdened with certain social services facilities. And, sort of as a way to be able, whenever the city puts a new shelter in a district, a community district, it is supposed to issue what's called a fair share analysis, which discusses the other types of facilities that are in the district, is sort of making a case that, the reason it's in here is in this district because, you don't have too much. And if you did, then you wouldn't get it. What we have noticed is that those reports oftentimes leave a lot to be desired and don't seem to be very well written. The committee seemed to want the city to really undertake a good survey so that we could definitively know what we have and how many beds, and then we essentially would use that to say to the city, look, we already have enough. That's probably why they're saying this is not a budget request. You are using us as your research arm or something like that. So that's where this is coming from.
And given that, if you could cut it, I feel like, I don't know if we're gonna get anything out of them.
Do people agree that we should cut it?
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, we will cut it. Okay, and then,
So I have a question about 23. don't we have a comprehensive coastal resiliency and flood risk study now? Aren't we building all this other stuff? So I don't know what we're really asking for now.
So if you can go to the description, from what my understanding was from this request from last year was that what has already been done is not sufficient and we need to be doing more.
So we're asking them to go, I'm reading, from 25th Street to 42nd Street.
Yes.
Right, that was,
Because that's not covered in the current.
right, that was a recommendation of
Coastal resiliency, yeah.
our intern. That we had last year on the land use committee.
Got you. Okay. Thank you.
But if you notice the agency's response, you know, I don't know that much has actually been done on this. If the agency's not going to move on this unless this really, really is shown to be a priority from the board, and I'm not talking about just moving it up the numbers. I don't really, again, this is more art than science. My personal view is that whether it's 7 or 8 or 8 or 9 doesn't really matter. But you know, the committee needs to, or the board needs to, like with any of these, needs to really, really do the shoe leather work to go to the agencies and make the case. And it's just judging by the agency's response, I'm not sure they even understand what we're asking. But
yeah,
I also think that doing this the day before full board in October, it's a bit late. So maybe for next year, work with the land use committee to sort of suss out exactly what is being asked for.
yeah, this was in a presentation by the intern, showing
The
that,
community planning fellow.
yes, I call him the intern. The Army Corps of Engineer maps apparently showed more vulnerability to coastal flooding than is currently being defended by the East Side Coastal Resiliency. According to him.
Yeah, I mean, in this situation, given that in the blurb, you only can put so many words in, it almost requires you to have a meeting with them to tell them what you want. But we can move on because
Can you mark that on there?
Mark,
That we should have a meeting with him? Cause he does have I think, I don't know where he ended up now. I think he told me, but I forget now. But he's moved on, but his records should be available through the board.
You mean the community planning fellow?
Yes.
Well, he's not in our employ. He never was. He's done with us. So we should, and then probably if you're going to have a meeting with anyone, you should probably have a meeting with the responsible agency in this case.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I think Jim was talking about that, but the report we have at CB6 has that he worked on. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we can move on for that. Or the other thing is in April, when we respond to this, we maybe give a more detailed response at that point. So that's something I will, since you're on land use, maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah. Who is the responding agency for that?
City planning.
DCP? Okay.
Yep. Okay, the next request, this is new, so we have to think about, it's just been put here because it's new. Another public safety, it's security at homeless shelters. You know, a lot of security has been contracted out. It's inconsistent from shelter to shelter. The street homeless population will say that they do not sometimes feel safe in homeless shelters, and they're trying to get more funding, to not only for more funding for security, but to have consistency across homeless shelters.
Are DHS police NYPD, or are they're separate?
are you talking about the security at shelters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they in
If I remember
Montpelier?
correctly, at the 30th Street shelter, it's DHS police, but
They're their own entity.
But at a lot of places in our district, it's private security.
Yeah,
And it was of particular concern with the 45th Street shelter where there was a murder.
Yeah, there was a murder
year.
last December.
And in the months before and in the months after
Yeah.
that, there were concerns about security at that shelter and just in general about
and
security.
the security being some of the instigators of problems, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so most of them are contract guards.
Yeah,
Yes.
part of it. And you don't really have any accountability that way,
Well, not only that, it's the training and what control you have.
Yes.
they're rent-a-cows.
Yeah, and so this, I mean, this is in conjunction to a resolution that Public Safety wrote asking, so not only do they want more funding for the city to provide the DHS police for the shelters, but then in the resolution advocating that you do not have these contracted security people.
But
But that's the
DHS,
only way that's the only way they do that. They do that at the federal level too. They don't want to increase the workforce.
Yes.
but what are DHS police? Are they like sworn peace officers? Are they NYPD?
No, I mean, I have no
Right.
idea how they're trained or what, yeah. I mean, that's a question, I guess.
That's
I don't
the
know if you
reason-
can answer that question.
9 times out of 10, I talk to homeless guys, and I talk to a lot of them. They won't go to a shelter because the shelters are unsafe. The reason the shelters are unsafe is there's no police on hand.
Mhm.
So, that's why you see a lot of guys on the street. There's a kid 23, 24 years old. He was sitting all summer at the Manhattan Bridge entry. And I asked him, so what's up? Why don't you? He's just said, I've been to the Bowery Mission and I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. So, if you can't guarantee their safety, they're not gonna go to the shelter system.
Yeah.
So, you want to cure a lot of the problems with the homeless, make the shelters safe.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, we're all in agreement that we want this to be included here and
Yes.
that we want to move it up.
Yes,
The question is, where do you want to?
Yeah, now the question is where, so,
And I think we could move it up above like 8. Because that's like, that would be the second DHS request.
yes, that's a good suggestion.
So have it be at 8.
Yes, like 8. Well, then I have a question about 8, but yeah, we can move it to 8.
Yeah, and right now we I don't think we have a 7, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's
Yeah,
also
yeah,
some.
yeah.
Yeah, there's
also
double,
some-
doubles, yeah, so then.
Jesus
Well,
has raised
big
his
fan.
hand.
Yeah,
This is,
it is.
Just a comment. I think it's too late for this fiscal year 2025, but maybe next year, it might be good to, if this particular security problem exists in other shelters in our district, to cite those. This one specifically cites the New Providence Women's Shelter, which technically is no longer in our district because the clients have been moved out to another district to live in a hotel for 3 or 4 years while their building is demolished and rebuilt. So, if the city is paying attention, they'll be like, well, this is not a concern for you anymore because that shelter's not there. But so, for next year, I don't know if they'll say that, but for next year, it may be good to see if this exists in other shelters, to cite those as well, because for the next 3 or 4 years, the New Providence shelter will effectively not exist in our district.
Jesus, can we just make it a generic statement for all the shelters in our district?
I would be hesitant to do that because unless you are certain that this problem exists in all the shelters in our district,
There's a
I
lot of
don't
problems.
know how closely the agencies read this. I don't know whether they look at them and think like, what are these people thinking? They don't even actually know anything. But I would prefer not to confirm their suspicions, and everything we send them, my own instinct is to make sure that it's well researched and true and that we know what we're talking about.
Thank you,
I mean,
Jesus. Yeah,
it's too late to remove it, I think, but I would have said perhaps wait. But at the time that the committee passed this, they didn't know that the shelter would be shutting down so soon.
yeah, I mean, so what I would say for this is, this blurb was written by myself and Brendan today because we got a long description from the committee, right? And we took parts of it out. And we chose to include this part on the Providence Women's Shelter. Jesus makes a good point. We could, something I hadn't thought about when we included this, we could take that part out.
Take what part?
The part that mentions the shelter.
So now it's a generic statement.
Yeah,
Cut from many shelters in our district in favor of private security.
yeah.
So we need to hope that this problem, or we need to, well, I guess what we're saying here is that we think this problem exists at other shelters in our district that we don't name. So let's hope it does. I shouldn't say that, but let's see if it does, because if it doesn't, if I were the Department of Homeless Services, I would say this doesn't exist right now in your district. But again, we don't know, and I think it's too late to be quibbling.
So I
And
think you
blurb
hear about
said-
violence in all the shelters. So I think
Yeah.
this is a fair statement.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, in the blurb Matt said earlier today, he said it goes like across all the shelters in our district, just by varying amounts, so I feel okay about that.
yeah.
Yeah, because, and that was the point, that,
Yeah.
we chose to include that part, but Matt had a more broader statement in his
Yeah.
email.
And if you talk to the guys, they never want to go to a shelter. That's why they're on the street. They don't feel safe. It's usually the older guys.
It's usually the vets.
Yes, almost always, I do this thing called Project Hope every year, which is something, it's a very informative, and the coldest day in January, 4,000 people volunteer to do a survey of the homeless population, those homeless street population, and you talk to people. And so often it's the vets who don't want to go, and they don't
Yeah.
feel safe.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of them are still Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
You're gonna be seeing a lot more of them,
No,
younger ones now.
Yep.
Meanwhile, give your money to tunnel to towers. Because God knows we can't use tax dollars to take care of the veterans.
okay, so. Right, any other comments on the expense, and then we can move on to continue. Support,
Yes, restoration of New York City's graffiti,
yes,
yes. Yes. And I'd give it higher priority too. I don't know what the number is. And it has to be done. You can't let it sit there for 2 weeks before you get to clean it. If it's there, it has to be cleaned up like within 24 to 48 hours. My building got tagged. We hired a private contractor. It was gone within 12 hours. You make it so that the kids who are doing this realize it's pointless.
And do we want to make the change in the notes, just to full restoration?
yes, I think that's,
It should work on the computer.
yeah, it says, where it says ask for the restoration, it say ask for the full restoration.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Okay, and keep it at 13 or move it,
I think it's
Sure.
fine with,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
only EDC request.
yes, yeah, okay. Moving down. Okay, so. We talked about the budget for that. We can go down further if no one has comments. The increased tenant protection and right to counseling, that there was some funding in the city budget for that. And what was the response we got from it?
Oh, come on.
Okay, I thought that was something that was talked about.
It
in the city.
was.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
think
it was
the
in the
city funded it.
executive budget, yeah.
I think that, I don't know if it was this, yeah, I think it was the city that funded it. That's just a cut and paste answer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It is an interesting answer, that's for sure.
yeah,
I'm almost certain they funded it. We just,
Yeah,
but my battery's almost dead.
if you can make a note of looking it up
Yeah.
and telling us tomorrow morning,
Yeah,
that'd
I'm
be
almost
great.
certain.
it's in the notes, right? It says like 36 million was funded.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
Yeah.
add it there, off the city budget. It's not
Yeah.
proposed,
Yeah.
it's not proposed, it's passed.
Yeah.
That's city council.
yeah, because I thought it was not this year's executive, it was last year, it was the 2023 executive.
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So then should we take it up? I mean, it says increase, you could always ask for more.
I would always
funding.
ask for an increase. I would leave it.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
That's a fungible item. If they have to cut, they'll cut that.
okay. All right, we talked about the coastal resiliency study. And then we get to the end of this, I think, and then we're to continued support. All right. And I mean, we don't have any rankings for continued support. Here you have when we were talking about the Murphy Brothers Park Comfort Station, that was one of the bathrooms that did get funded.
Murphy's Brothers Park Dog Run, isn't that a capital?
No, it's already, it's in the process. We just want to make sure it's done.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, same thing with the comfort station. We just,
Right.
we haven't actually seen it, but they said it's getting done.
The only items that are eligible for continued support are capital items.
Alright. That's what I thought. The security system for PS 116, what's the status on that? But. Wanted in a prior fiscal year. So is it in place? Does anybody know?
It says it was funded.
It says it was funded, it doesn't mean it's.
And the
in
contract
place.
is in place, but it doesn't mean it's done.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so until we hear back that it was done, we keep it on.
and I got kids in 116.
Yeah,
Rachel, did the Youth and Education Committee ever get back to you?
No,
Okay, well, that's why we don't know.
yes,
but also I'll say again, at least in my experiences, and Jesus can correct me on this, in my experiences, if something actually gets done, it'll be made clear by the agency.
yeah, they'll tell us.
So
Yeah,
they'll make it clear.
Or your response is just winding, right?
yeah,
Just
yeah,
humoring us.
Or at least if they know if it's done.
yeah. Okay, I think we may be at the end then.
Yay.
So do I make a motion?
Maybe at the end.
Yeah, yeah. I think that PS 116 was the last one. Okay,
Cool.
Let me just make sure all the numbers are correct.
and to Stephen and Robert, you know, our meetings usually never run this long, and so I just don't want to scare you guys off. Make sure you come to the next
Get
meeting.
scared. Be scared, be very scared.
Yeah, it's usually much shorter.
Yeah,
I'm just,
Next month, we get the controller's
Yeah.
report, the end of this month.
but yeah,
We should tear that apart, because he does it now in 5 separate or several separate things. And we were gonna ask for
the
the,
actuary, which I did message
City
them, but I
actuary.
said, yeah, to
What
come.
do you say?
But I hadn't said November, I said either fall or the spring.
Right.
So I'll have to follow up on that.
Yeah. But we get the comprehensive annual report.
It should be
the
coming
end of
out this month.
October,
Yeah.
the end of the month, toward the end of the month.
Okay, now all the rankings should be in place, and I'm happy to just sort of quickly go down the
Okay.
rankings.
Why don't you just send it to us so we can go proof it? Just distribute it the way you did earlier in the email.
Like a link?
Yeah.
Sure.
Does this have to be presented at the board meeting tomorrow?
Yeah, we have to put this in a resolution and get it done by tomorrow,
Yes.
early in the day, so that we
need
can
to
send
put
it.
a
But
resolution together.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's why I'm intent on
just getting this done.
on making sure that the committee sees what we have and make sure that, say, there aren't any errors. Since there's a lot of shuffling around this evening. No, it should be largely fine, but this is going to be going before a full board in under 24 hours.
Yeah. And just want to make sure that there isn't like two of the same numbers, or we missed a number, or this
Where
type
will
of.
we meeting tomorrow night?
Same Waterside Plaza.
At Waterside Plaza, yeah.
Same room.
Yes. Making sure I didn't end up shortchanging an item.
Yeah.
For reshuffling.
Looks good to me.
And if I'm going too quickly, let me know.
Can you just go back to the removes?
Yes.
It was just the two.
Yeah.
Yep.
You guys should look at the auditorium in the old nursing school on 24th Street. This is space.
The auditorium, the old nursing school on 24th Street, 24th and
First.
24th and the first. Yeah, I don't know if
It's a huge auditorium. It's got like probably 2,000 seats, or at least 1,000.
It was that big? Wow.
Yeah, you know where it is?
No, I didn't even know there was a
You
nursing.
talking
home.
about the Steinberg Center?
No, I forget what they.
is this what you know?
It's the old Hunter College campus. at
Oh,
20
yeah, I know that.
Yeah, they've got a huge, big auditorium as you come in the building on the left-hand side.
Yeah, I don't know if you know what Jim is talking about, Jesus, but yeah, definitely.
It's on 24th Street. Just east of First Avenue. It's used to be.
Oh, where they do
old
early
nursing school. Used to be a
No,
nursing
24th Street, that's the VA hospital. VA hospital goes from 23rd all the way to 25th.
No, it's the street next to it then.
The
No,
25th,
on the
Yeah.
north side.
the old Brookdale campus.
Yes, that's the one.
So that's what I'm saying, where we do early voting.
Right.
All right, if there's a big auditorium there, I've not seen it. I know there's a sort of
It's a huge
multi-purpose
auditorium.
area where people can sit out chairs, but I've never seen any.
On the left-hand side, we had hearings there about when they were talking about putting the garage there. On that site, we had a hearing there, and it's a huge auditorium.
So Brendan, this looks good.
Yep, if anyone wants me to scroll back or if I scroll too quickly, let me know, but yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I think I'm good, because I was scrolling here, and I think Nat also scrolled through it, right? You were.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Okay.
Do it on here.
Wait, one thing. Fund in place support services for seniors, that's, what do they call it? Naturally occurring retirement communities, right?
It's support in place.
Right. But we had removed the other one, removed. the
That's
enhanced
different.
services. So. Is that incongruent?
No, because this is actually support, so that you could stay in your own apartment and stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, in fact, Waterside Plaza has become a NAR. Yeah, they're naturally occurring and they've done things, I mean, like rent caps, but also they have NYU residents who they give housing to, so then they can
Check
have,
people out.
yeah,
That's
they
cool.
can help seniors.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't see any further changes to this. Does anyone else?
No,
Yeah. All right, well, thank you, everybody, for your time.
Wait,
Oh.
So we have to make a resolution, say
Yeah,
that
you had
we're
resolution,
approving.
sorry.
there needs to be something.
No, I know, I know, and we even talked about the resolution, and then I completely overlooked, I'm like, okay, we checked it. So somebody needs to make a motion for a resolution.
I move that we adopt the budget requests in the order presented.
Second.
Okay,
Okay,
so when I call your name, please state whether you are in favor, opposed, abstain, or abstain for cause.
A roll call or voice?
yeah, I think this is a roll call.
Yes. Jim Collins,
Yay.
B. Disman,
Yes,
Ed Kalani,
In favor.
Ava Marie Lassiter,
In favor,
Reshma Patel,
In favor.
Stephen Paris,
In favor.
and Roberto Ruiz Melendez.
In favor.
Okay, with 7 in favor, nobody opposed or abstaining, this resolution unanimously passes.
What are the 3 quick Q and As?
Oh, those are,
Comments, I think those are from earlier.
those are from earlier.
Yeah. All right,
Old business?
yeah,
New business?
yeah, I mean, I actually, yeah, I'm gonna waive the chair's report. I had some stuff, but we can talk about it in November. Anyone have any old or new business?
No.
Nope. All right. So
Very
B, you
well.
want to make the motion?
make a motion to adjourn.
All right, so we're adjourned.
All right.
And, oh, then the time for the